Okay, just checking to see if everything is synchronizing up, and I think we're in. Welcome everyone to the show. Welcome to Wrist Shot Week. Another week, another huge series of pieces that we're going to see and have a look at. Want to say hi to everyone in the chat before we get in. All I can say is it's going to be a big show. There is a lot on offer. Let me just catch up with everything going on here. Welcome Ben, Junior Johnson, Maynard, Raymond, Eric, Gary, Megan, welcome, Curtis, Shot in the Dark. So many of your names. It's fantastic to have you all here. Hans, Jenks, Maynard, Chip. Welcome, all of you who have joined in. It's going to be a monster. So let's just get right in and talk about the pieces because the housekeeping is good and all. But as you can probably see on the left-hand side of the screen, the list of pieces that are on show, there are too many of them. I'm actually quite overwhelmed because I haven't run the show in like a week or at least a week and a half, 2 weeks. I've just collected such a huge series of pieces to show off. So it's going to be a biggie. But again, welcome to all of you who are joining. Doctor, good to have you here. It's going to be a great time. Yeah, David, Karasis, BDev, so good. And Neil, so good having you all. Okay, where to begin? Just a bit of, to begin the show, I can talk about what happened this week. 2 videos came out. The first was on no-date watches. And the second one, I think I must have botched the algorithm or something because the video died as soon as it went up. And it has to do with car brands and watch brands. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, it was quite a deep exercise trying to like source out brands and manufacturers and all of that. As I'm going back into this, I will put a link in the corner of the screen for a replay if anyone's interested. So in the corner of the screen now, you'll see a link to it. But it's a video that YouTube seems to have either like really pushed down in the archives, or it just wasn't seen because no one's interested in it. I don't know. Either way, it was a cool exercise talking about watches and car brands for a change, something a little bit different, off the beaten track. And to all of you again, Megan, nice to see you. Flip and Zippo, thank you so much for the super chat. It is such a pleasure. And Eric, Max, so many more of you. Okay, let's just get going, get the ball rolling. What's happening next week is I'm unveiling a new watch. And what's cool is that I have you on the show. I can actually give a small reveal, a debut of what's coming out next week. So let's just first talk about the piece that I'm wearing, and then we can jump to the cover photo watch and start the show as we always do. And Toby Talks Cars. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed putting the video together. I'm glad. I can see you must have come from a car channel, or you are a car channel, so you might have found some enjoyment in that. A bit divided as a subject because, as we know, some people don't like car brands and the rest. The two being paired together, it's quite outgoing. Okay, so let's just talk about this. So Eddie, the owner of Time Factors and the Smith's name, sent me a handful of pieces to discuss and review. And he sent me a very special set that we will look at in a second. For all of you who are joining, you'll be able to see a small reveal of the watch that's going to be spoken about next week. I'm sharing a video. David, thank you. Thank you for the super chat. You could never be a one watch guy with that Omega. No, Chi-Town, so I don't actually own these pieces at this point in time, believe it or not. This is a Smith's PRS 29. It's a tribute to the W10, as most of us know. It's a W10 on a G10 strap, so I thought that was pretty cool, a nice comparison. It is such a cool piece. I've grown so fond of it. It uses a hand-wound ETA movement. The loom is fantastic. It works so well. I'm really enjoying the hell out of it, wearing it. But the big reveal, to all 77 of you watching, I've got to get this ball rolling because it's going to be a long show as it is. Even before Eddie, the owner, had the watch in hand, he sent it to me. And it is a watch that took a year to develop, and now we can all see it for the first time. I'm going to bring up a picture. On Wednesday, the full review video is going to be up, but it is. Some of you can maybe drop it in the chat what you think it might be, what it could be. This is a very faithful tribute. So, yeah, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on this piece in its entirety, in this setting. I can't wait to share the video as of next week. It'll be Wednesday, I think. Any Urwerk owners out there? Brick Lane, the best we have is Ulysses Nardan tonight, actually. IWC Mark 11, Amin says. Yeah, you got that right. So this is probably one of the closest faithful tributes to a Mark 11. and everything, case dimensions, proportions, nailed. And it was a great exercise. I really look forward to sharing the discussion. I show you technical drawings, all of those details, a great little bit of history, and it's quite a relevant story about this piece as well. So look forward to this next week, and it's going to be a great time. I really had a lot of fun putting it together over the course of this week. Okay, going to keep rolling. Let's get into the watches because there are just so many. And let's begin by talking about the cover photo, watch that belongs to Juan. He kind of pulled this out of the bag, I must say. It's a Breguet Classique 5157, as I'm sure most of us know. Let's try and get this scroll bar out the way. And it's just phenomenal. I mean, if I pull the watch up, what really sold it to me as a cover photo watch is the mood, the atmosphere, the area that it was taken with the contrast and the shadows and everything. Shaitan asking, is the watch manual one? Yes, it is. All the watches that I will be talking about, all the military pieces, this W10 model, sorry, W11, what am I saying? Mark 11 is also hand-wound. All the pieces are. And Buganish asking, how many watches do you hoard? I really don't know. Juan has a lot of tricks up his sleeve, but this one really is, I thought, as a cover photo, the way it's portrayed in this lighting, you get to see the guilloche, you get to see all the finishing on the case, the dial, the blued hands, and I just love the atmosphere, the setting it's in, that harsh light, you know, contrast. And I want to wait for a few more people to catch up. I have hardly greeted any of you in the chat because I feel like this is going to be a 3-hour show, pumping myself full of caffeine to get going because it's going to be a long one. And everything from entry level to high horology, it's fantastic. It's such a well-rounded show. For it generally is, but I think for a change we get to see a lot more, you know, micro brands. We get to see some Seikos and then G-Shocks, and then suddenly we get to some serious high-end pieces as well. And Thomas saying Time Factor is releasing some great stuff at the moment. About time I get to review some sort of pieces. Yeah, it is fantastic. And Eddie, I actually asked if he would like to send in a shot that he's been wearing of a watch, and he's done that too with a technical drawing. So we get to enjoy that later as well. Yeah, it's going to be a monster. But as it is, this piece as the cover photo, I think it really did win hands down just because of how well it's set. It looks absolutely phenomenal. And of course, there's some more watches from Juan. I don't think we have any vintage pieces from him this week. If those of you who are new, Juan tends to send in a huge selection of pieces for us to look at. And this time around, it's a little bit more toned down, which is great. I think I saw him in the chat earlier. And there isn't a movement shot. You're right. That is the problem. It's just this piece. Okay, I'm going to carry on and get this started. We're going to start with A, as always, because Apple loves alphabetical order for some reason. I'm going to start with Abu, who sends in an Elliot Brown Holton. And I really do not know this brand whatsoever. Maybe someone does in the chat. Maybe someone has seen this before in the past, but I have never. It looks like a military issue piece, and I think it's actually, it does have a legitimate history, or it's been used by military forces at this point in time. The thing is, again, when I get sent all of these submissions, I think, I'm going to try and get rid of this stupid scroll bar. Hold on a sec. I think all in all, there were about 130 submissions this week. And you can imagine it's difficult to keep track of everything and to name, file everything. So I'm sure I'm going to miss a few details of pieces that you've sent me, but we'll try our best and we'll try and get through the many pieces on offer. Shaitan, have a fisherman's friend. You know what? I'm going to do that because I've got it right next to me and I know I'm going to need them. So I'm going to open up the packet right here. I'm going to throw one in to start the show. Because I don't know what the voice is going to do. The voice is being so unresponsive lately. You got to hear me when I'm trying to record. Sometimes it can be the worst thing on earth. Okay, so going to carry on. So Abu, thank you for sending this in. One thing I like about it is the balance. You'll notice something very clear with all of these pieces. The numerals on the dials, they seem to be so well shared. A lot of the time, there's this balance between numerals spaced on. It's almost like a lot of these pieces, last week we spoke about 50s inspirations. These pieces seem to all take that and use that element in their designs. And this, I'm sure it's a micro brand of some kind. I've never heard of it before. This to me is something that kind of represents the 50s inspired aesthetics. We have beautiful sword hands, very much inspired by mil-sub attributes like a full bezel. I think this is a PVD case. I don't know what the case is finished in. Maybe it's a ceramic insert. Very nice contrast, though. It's nice seeing a micro brand. I think we have a few more on the show that we'll be looking at as we progress. But again, those of you who are just joining, there are too many pieces on offer on the show, and it's going to get ridiculous. I feel like it's going to get a bit crowded with watches. So if I don't refer to you in the chat, I might have to speed through this a little bit faster than usual, because as it is, I feel like it's going to be an hour, 3 hour long at least. Is that an MOD insignia? Shaitan asks. I think it is. I think this watch does have a military issue somewhere. I don't know where it's set. Again, the name is Elliot Brown Holton. Maybe it's based in the Southern Hemisphere. I must have missed the details, because as it is, I'm scrolling and saving always. Okay, I'm going to carry on through the next. So next is, and thank you for this, Abu. Next is from Alex. And again, for those of you who have sent in submissions, I think I stopped saving submissions at about midday UK time today and Saturday. So that's been, what, 10 hours. I haven't been saving pieces. So you might find your watch isn't here, but as it is, they'll be carried over to next week. That's generally how the shows go. The rest of you, I'm going to try and catch up with you all here if I can. So Thomas saying that Elliot Brown make watches for the RNLI, Coast Guard. Thank you for that, Thomas. Didn't know. And Running Man says, just water. I've done 30-hour streams and energy drink. Okay, so Running Man is actually a fellow YouTuber. I didn't realize, but he actually streams on this platform, and he sent in a great selection of pieces. So we will enjoy your watches just now, sir. And yeah, I want to catch up with all of you as much as Neil asking, how do you send in yours? If you'd like to get me more directly, tag me at IDguy in the chat. Sorry, not in the chat. Yes, in the chat. And if you'd like to reach me on email, scroll down a little bit and you can see on your screen in the description, my email address is on the second line, just under Wrist Shot Week, episode 8. Hope that helps. Okay, so next we have a Speedy Ultraman. This is the re-edition of the legendary Ultraman that's become so sought after and successful and collected by so many people. These are also, I'm sure, going to go up in value, because the modern ones are very sought after. And just as an everyday wearer, there's something about a modern homage to the reissues, or what should I say, a modern homage to those pieces. I think it's very practical as an everyday wearer. You can use it. Don't have to worry about looking after it so much. And yeah, I've got to keep up with you in the chat. I'm going to try and, as it always is, I get this huge caffeine spike before the show starts, and then it's me just trying to keep up with everything going on in the chat and presenting at the same time. So it's an interesting job. I generally have a Sunday hangover because of it, but you know, it's always fun. Anthony's asking a question about this fisherman's friend is getting my face. What do you think of the 10K smoked sapphire crystal tourbillon from that micro brand from Melbourne, Australia, that producer Michael was flogging? I haven't. I think I saw. I always get his suggestions, no matter what. It's amazing how the algorithm works, and how sometimes you just get suggestions of channels that you don't watch usually. But I did briefly look through it. It's fascinating that a brand can actually offer a tourbillon for that kind of price, no question. Whether or not the movement is made of certain parts, good parts, don't know. That's the next question. Okay, thank you for this, Alex. It's awesome seeing the Speedmaster. And funnily enough, next up we have a Flightmaster from Alan. Alan is a pilot, and this watch, it looks, we've actually featured it on the show before, but it's amazing where the dial has gone. It looks like it's been submerged in the ocean. And I think he titled the email something like Flightmaster with all of its colors. And we get to enjoy this faded dial effect. I can imagine he was flying, I don't know what plane he was flying in this shot, but it's great seeing it on the wrist. And the Flightmaster as it is, I don't know the added feature, but it is, I'm guessing the bezel is set in such a way that you can use it to help. Oh, it has a compressor style. So you can actually adjust the bezel inside as well as using the full chronograph function as well. Nice combination of colors. I just find it so peculiar seeing how that dial has changed over time. And with a bit of research before the show, I looked into the Flightmaster a bit more, and it seems like there's quite a common color scheme that these seem to go. This is one example of one that looks like it's had a good life. It's experienced, I don't know what kind of life it's experienced per se, but Yeah, it's been used. You can say that much. Okay, Alan, thank you for this. I've got to carry on with these names because as it is, we're what, 15 minutes in? Not bad, you know. We're doing pretty well. Now, this was one of the most recent shots that was sent into me, and I, for the life of me, do not know the brand. It's a Mido, but I don't know the under all rail, all dial. Maybe it's a rail clock related piece. And this comes in from Antonio. I need to get back to you in the chat because there's so much going on here, as always is the case. So Megan's saying that right now many of them are for sale on the market, talking about the Ultraman. So people are interested in, you know, it's always the case. It's buying and selling for a higher price. And I mean, it should be interesting to see what happens in the next few years because they only made a limited run of them. When they all disappear, do you think they will go up in value? It's a peculiar thing how the market is dictated by things like social media, etc., as we know. So Han's saying, I have to say this, but Omega Speedy, the Flightmaster, Speedmaster 2, they do less than nothing for me. I mean, it's a peculiar, I can say that the Flightmaster is not a watch that I would gravitate towards immediately. I mean, it's a monster. I haven't studied the history of the piece at all. Looks like a piece that follows 70s cues with a large case, but it is a very peculiar animal. Even the Mark II, another one, they're not exactly non-polarizing. Some pieces are much clearer to understand and others are highly technical. Not up everyone's alley, of course not. So this Mido, don't know about the name. Flip and Zippo saying it is a very underrated piece. I don't know what caliber it uses. It uses an ETA. And Bricklane saying that the first, Shaitan saying the first Omega in space is my favorite. It is a great piece, no question. It's awesome. So this is, and also looking at the numeral layout on the dial, there's mention about checkbook font. It's a peculiar layout, right? Very digital-esque. Reminds me of something you would see on what they call them, Nixie watches or something like that, right? Those old school tube-powered watches. Those numerals, the setting, very, very old school. Reminds me of something you'd see on like a nuclear submarine, whatever else. Cool looking piece. I do like the highlights. I like the fact that the orange is contrasting against the black. Very legible, easy to read. Also a nice bracelet. Does tie in quite well with the piece. Looks like something from, you know, the 70s, 80s era for sure. Antonio, thank you for sending this in. And I've got to keep moving ahead. Next is from Arilyn, and he sends in Skydweller, Rolex Skydweller, blue dial, and it is a gem. Really interesting piece. I really like making the video on this watch, talking about it being quite an important watch from the Rolex family. It was a step that they took to create a watch that was unique and different. One of the first, you know, real new additions to the line. And they did an amazing job. We talk about the complication. It's definitely not for everyone. I mean, we talk about pilots using these watches. We actually have a few in the audience who are pilots and they do use this watch. But I can imagine some would find it a bit peculiar, all the elements arranged the way they are, with the subdial in the middle. I must say they really cleaned up this watch with the subdial that matched the main dial, because in the beginning it was just a white, this bright white window that just lay in the middle. This looks much cleaner, simpler to look at in the beginning at least. And then when you start looking at all the details, it gets quite technical. Yeah, but it's an awesome watch. I think the whole idea of the complication with that extra red highlight in the corner, it's very neat, a very unique way of addressing the day of the week and the month. Or I say just the month. All of you joining, thank you so much. Boozer, welcome. There's a few more of you who I haven't said hi to. Blue shirt, you've just arrived. Great. You're not late, don't worry. We've been running for like 18 minutes. It's me just getting the housekeeping out of the way for the most part. Shaitan saying Skydweller has that jet-setting lawyer's watch vibe about it. The way I addressed this watch, we actually have a few GMTs on the show too. Now this feels to me much more like a watch that we should have seen in the 50s that was introduced, you know, in and around the time of the GMT watch. This feels like something a lot more in line with that time period, you know, where the day date and the date just were just so popular. You get to enjoy a much more dress-oriented piece that manages to accommodate all of your needs when you are traveling. And one very good point is, why would you need to know the month on the watch? I mean, is it very difficult to not remember the month? I mean, we're in June at this point, right? It's that kind of thing where catch-22. It's a great complication, but at the same time, it's a bit of a peculiar function. Nice to see how they integrated it in the piece, though. Watch and pray. I have to ask, what car do I drive? I drive a 1.9, what's it, a 1.9 Polo GT from 2004, the last of the last. So it has all the trimmings. It has an electric roof. It has, it was such a great car. They did such a great job with it. And it's just a ton of fun to drive. So I drive a Polo and I own an Omega. Goes to show how well my logic was thought through with that video. But it's a lot of fun. Again, I said in the beginning of the video saying that, you don't need to own the car to own the watch and vice versa. I think that's an important distinction to make. Just because you own one doesn't mean you need to own the other. But yeah, I love that talk. I highly recommend you have a look at it if you're more interested in car brands and how they could hypothetically blend in with watches. And dear Artifact, great having you here, sir. It's always a pleasure. Your watch will be coming up soon. Giza says he eats Polo. Nice. And drive an Omega. Okay, so Arilyn, thank you so much for sending this in. Next, we've got Arik. Arik has a pooch hanging in the corner here. We've been chatting about sharing dogs with our watches. Some like doing it, others don't. And I don't know, it's still difficult. I wish I could share a photo with my dogs, but sadly, I can't. Oops, missed it. So this is a Hamilton Khaki King. Another piece that, I haven't actually, again, I'll emphasize that I don't look at these watches very long. I save them, file them away. So getting some time to actually look at them now is quite a treat. Amazing how much of a Flieger aesthetic this watch has adopted. Type B dial all the way. I don't know if these watches were ever used in service. Maybe someone can clarify. Flip and Zipper asking, anyone can explain what a Polo is? A Polo is the smaller version of the Golf, basically. And that's about it, really. They shrunk the Golf down ever so much to make it a more affordable car, basically. And what's happened since then, as of this point in time, they've enlarged the VW Polo to be basically exactly the same as the standard Golf. And I feel like they did that to push the sales of the Up. Yeah, talking about cars, we'd be here all day. A Polo is a Seiko 5. It's funny. It's great. So I need to there's talk about, so Brick Lane's saying I own a 2001 Nissan and I like Pateks. Yeah, again, talking about cars, you just never know. And Shaitan saying again, is your Polo the same size as the City Golf? No, they are a bit bigger. Have a look. Go onto Google, type in, I'm sure it's a 2004 Polo GT. And it's the last of the last. So they put all the equipment in it. Great car. Anyway, jumping back. So we have a day-date complication. Hamilton as a brand, oops, Magic Mouse is being unresponsive as always. Hamilton as a brand is one that I need to study more because I'm so into field watches and pieces of the time. I'd love to study a bit more about their history and maybe talk about military service and all of those pieces. But incredible, again, I'll say, incredible how they've incorporated the Flieger aesthetic with this watch and the Type B style dial. Also nice to see a date complication, something we don't see very often in a watch that is relatively affordable in the scheme of things. I feel like this is the same complication that they used in the Interstellar watch. I feel like the Interstellar watch also had a date complication. Again, Hamilton as a brand, I need to study more, look into it. And I'm going to jump into the next piece. Thank you for this, Arik. We're jumping to B now. We've arrived at B, 23 minutes into the show, which is a pretty good start. Kind of, sort of. Oh, no. Come on, work with me, mouse, please. So this is quite a special Longines, 1949. And if I'm not wrong, this is from B-Dev. B-Dev should be in the chat, actually. He was gifted this watch as an engagement present from his wife. And this piece, again, from 1949. It's incredible how these watches have managed to last as long as they have and still look relatively clean and tidy, And Marcello saying, just arriving. No, you didn't miss much. We've just started. We literally have just started. I've been tripping over my words for the last 20 minutes, but I think I'm finally starting to mellow out and the caffeine has gone through the brain, is now in my bloodstream and flowing well. So hitting the whiskey, and I'll catch up with you now. It's great that you can all engage in the chat while I am hanging out here. So it allows me to focus a little bit more in on the presentation itself. And Juan's saying, beautiful Longines. BDev, sorry, BDev, you're right. So your mother gave it to your father in 1949 as an engagement. Thank you. That makes more sense. So that was it. I kind of caught it. What happens is when I name these photos, I normally put in brackets a detail about the piece, something to just hit a switch and remind me. So your mother gave this to your father, 1949 as an engagement present. Diamond set inside the dial. And speaking of which, I've really been enjoying watching watch repair videos. There's this whole, it's a whole different genre on this platform where we can actually appreciate what goes into restoring pieces. And I can't remember, what is his name? I saw a recommendation. Ooh, I found it. I found his channel. I'm putting his channel in the chat right now for you. I had such a good time last night watching, his name is Naked Watchmaker. I'm going to paste the link to his channel right now in the chat. Go and look at it and follow his page, because he was rebuilding a JLC must be from the 40s. And he goes through the whole process of re-nickel plating it, finishing it, cleaning the dial, completely overhauling the movements, bringing it back to life. And it's like a 40-minute video. So you really get to enjoy the little bits and pieces and learn. So again, have a look at his page. From Birmingham, Eric Bell says, yeah, I got a suggestion to look at it last night. He's got 65,000 views and the video has been up for 1 day. That is amazing. So if you want to see a classic JLC being restored to incredible condition, I mean, he even heat blued the hands and everything himself. It's fantastic. So really, go and check out his page. He deserves so many more followers. I've really been enjoying watching watch repair videos for a change. Instead of always talking about design, it's nice to just see the brass tacks, the effort that goes into fixing these pieces and bringing them back. Okay, BDev, thank you for this. I think you've sent a few more pieces in. He sent an LL Bean Hamilton, and very nice looking piece. Again, looks just like a field watch, has all the right cues, rail dial around the sides. We have gorgeous serifs on the numerals. The quality of the image might be from my side. It's not as high res, but you get a good idea of the setting and the placement. Lots of white accents around. Forgive me, but I don't know what LL Bean is. If someone could please tell me what LL Bean is. I'd like to know. Is it alcohol? Is it a brand? I can see it's reserved, so it must be a brand of some kind. I feel like it's an American maker, but for the life of me, I do not know. It's really nice seeing another field watch with the triangle at the top. They all incorporate the same cues. So they're talking about it's old people clothing. Thanks, Buganish. Yeah, I really don't know. So nice seeing this piece, and it lines up exactly with the little Smiths that I'm rocking. It's incredible how these pieces all share the same motifs in places. Rail dial, simple numerals, easy to read, pencil-styled hands, and that's it. That's how it rolls. Okay, and next he also sent in a Zin 303, and he gave me the case back shot. I feel like this piece was actually issued to a military force. So let's just have a look at this for a second. Really nice shot. We get to see it in great detail here. Orange highlights. I feel like this watch is from the 90s. I get a feeling, if I remember right. So facts and hacks saying LL Bean is an outdoor clothing brand from my state of Maine. Well, thank you for that. It's great to know. And more talking about repair YouTube channels. Really check them out. There's so many of them out there, and some are much more successful than others, but I think there are also some up-and-comers. And I really enjoy seeing, more than just seeing watches being serviced, I just love seeing watches being restored correctly, you know. I always find it very, and you can see it for all sorts of things. You can see someone who just restores Zippo lighters, for example. It's always incredible seeing them going from absolute trash heaps into completely new and fantastic condition things. And that JLC that I saw last night, amazing. Really nice approach, really well done. So Curtis saying, great ID minds think alike. Just watched the same JLC restoration here. It was so good. I think he's been recommended to many pages, which is great. The algorithm has been working in his favor. And 65,000 hits in a day, that's no small feat. So he must be reaching out. JLC, we love as a brand. So I'm sure it's gotten some kind of pull that way. So anyway, this Zin, I want to get to the case back because I think there's some, ooh, that's a nice shot. There's some detail here about it. This watch came out in the 90s. If BDev is in the chat still, maybe he can tell us a bit more. But this piece definitely was issued somewhere, and it has been used. It has all these different details about T's and H's and V's, Z's. Just when you think you've started learning about Zin, so you get thrown into a new realm. But this watch has been well loved, well worn, black gloves. I mean, you can see that this is, as German as it gets, It's great. It's really nice. 1996 to 2011. Thank you, BDev. So this, I feel like, this dial, it looks like it's tritium. I didn't see any tritium indication on the dial itself, but these markers look like they've aged. And the watch itself looks like it's had quite a good life. It's been worn well. So nice. Need to do more discussions around Zin. It was great to just decide to jump on and try something new and approach a different brand. 1997, I think Dino saying, thank you. Perfect serial killer set. It does though, right? It does really, the gloves really make it up. You can just see that. Exposed knuckles though, not so much. This is more the kind of gloves you'd be wearing if you were a part of a biker gang. If you're more of a criminal, criminals would tend to wear these more, wouldn't you say? That's great. BDev, thank you for sending this. And also, he sent in a tag F1 Golf. The Golf colors, I think, is what we're referring to here. And again, I didn't save any details about this piece, but funnily enough, I think we have maybe 3 watches in this lineup that all have the Golf colors assigned to them for one way or another. Why don't people wear driving gloves? I don't get it. Grip. Oh, why do people wear? I can answer that question, kind of, Boozer. What happened was steering wheels back in the day. If you look at steering wheels from cars in the 50s and the 60s, they were extremely thin. And most of the time they were made out of very inferior materials. Like they could be made out of wood, which is a problem in itself. Some were made out of plastics and all kinds of finishes. But because they were very thin and hard to grip, you need something to hold on to the surface. If you're driving something like a wood steering wheel, your hands start sweating, you don't have any grip, and guess where you're going to end up? So the idea of gloves generally is so that you can hold on to the steering wheel better. Nowadays, you don't need them because there's leather linings, there's all kinds of aesthetics that make them easier to grab functionally. But back in the day, steering wheels were very thin. Just look at any car from the 50s and 60s, and you'll understand just why you had to wear gloves to drive them. So Shaitan's saying a VC 1921 plus Jaguar perfection. Speaking of which, there is a VC 1921 on the show, which is one of our favorites, I think, as a community. We love it. And BDev saying my MG has a wood steering wheel, bad grip. Yeah, so that's basically it, Boozer. Pretty cool. Very classy as well. It's nice. It's a nice procedure. It's like waking up in the morning and putting on your watch. It's that whole process. You put on the gloves, you make sure everything's set, and you get going. It's one of those things. It's an extra check you can do when you're driving. So yeah, nice colors, as Megan said, nice color combo, and it's hilarious. But there are at least 3 golf-inspired watches on the show. Going to carry on through, jumping straight from this Tag Heuer to another Tag Heuer. Wouldn't you believe? I think these are from Switzerland, coming in from Benjamin. This is a Carrera, as we can clearly tell on the dial. I don't know. So when it comes to brands putting their actual name titles on their dials, sometimes it really works. Other times it can get very ostentatious. I think of the Blancpain 50 Fathoms, just Blancpain in general, how they engrave the side of the case. Sometimes it's just so overdone. This is quite nice. I mean, it's a bit heavy compared to the sub-seconds running on the left. But all in all, I really enjoy the numerals. It's nice seeing a Carrera that actually incorporates numerals around it. And the Heuer Carrera as a model line, some incredible pieces that have come from the family over time. Very Alan Partridge. Junior Johnson, I think we're talking about steering wheels, never knew that. Yeah, it's nuts. And Boozer saying, but people still take wrist shots in their 2020 Porsche with gloves on. Yeah, and I mean, that's really all just for show nowadays. You really don't need to at all. It's more of a fashion statement than anything else. If you're driving an old car, I mean, wearing gloves, it's pretty useful. The first thing I did when I've got an old school Beetle from 1968, I did swap out the steering wheel for an Alcantara one. But at the same time, I do want to make a custom wooden one for the car. So as it is, Very Portuguese, as Hans says. That's exactly what was on my mind. The up-down effect, the numerals around the dial, very much like at IWC, for sure. And if we think about the typical Carreras with batons and just the standard tri-dial layout, this is quite unique. Interesting take. And I'm sure it's an automatic. Oh, it is an automatic, as you can tell on the dial. And then he sends in another piece. He's clearly also loved the shot, by the way. Look at that setting. He's clearly a chronograph lover because he sends in, and if I'm not wrong, this is the first Rolex of the show. And if someone could please tell me what building this is, that would be amazing. It looks like a shrine. And in the water, it looks like a fork. Again, I haven't traveled Europe, so I hope to very soon when the world opens up again. But at this point, so he sends in a 116500 LN Panda, as most of us know. We had a Sky Dweller. Thank you, Geezer. Yeah, again, caffeine in the brain, having to present it gets a bit of a mess. Zane, good having you here, sir. And as we keep going, I hope I'm not missing too many of you in the chat. There was a mention from BDev saying, is that a Carrera 1887? Might be. Kind of looks like it's pretty classically inspired all the way through. He might have mentioned it. I just tagged it as Hoya Carrera, even though it is a tag Hoya Carrera. But yeah, talking about this, I think we have a few of these on the show. We actually have quite a lot of Daytonas. Come to think of it, I just find it incredible that you all seem to know what you're sending because you either send duplicates or you end up sending just the most bizarre pieces at the same time. And this show seems to be a blend of both. We get there's a big spectrum, I'll tell you that much. Everything from a couple hundred to hundreds of thousands. It's all on the show in one sitting. So it's always a pleasure. And is that a fork in the river, as underachieving watch collector asks? I really don't know. I've never seen this structure in my life. It could be a turbine, a wind turbine, a modern one, where it doesn't need rotating turbines itself. It's actually all inbuilt. Maybe someone can correct. That is a fork. I'm just looking at it again. I'm thinking this is in the distance and this is a reflection. That is a fork in the river. There it is. I mean, there's the reflection. It's, oh, you moron. That is literally a fork in the river. If someone understands if someone can explain this to me, I would like to know. That is the most peculiar thing. This was one of the last shots that was sent in to me as well, so I must have missed it. But as always, it's nice seeing a Panda Daytona. It's a fork in Lake Geneva. Thank you, Toby. That is just the most peculiar thing I've ever seen. Okay, right, going to carry on. Blue Shirt sends in a Aragon Black PVD. And if I'm not wrong, this is a prototype. And if I'm not wrong, Megan has a connection to this. And James, founder Timeless Capital, they've been sending out a few prototypes to a few fans of the channel, which is great. And he's been wearing this the whole week, as far as I know. I think he's in the chat as well, so maybe we can see him in a second. Interesting contrast of colors. As a brand, I haven't studied, but I do know that they are popular, and people seem to be jumping on to, am I saying it right? Is it Aragon? I think Argon, but then also think Lord of the Rings, and I get a little bit confused. Nice. So we have a 20. Does this look like a 24? So we have a 24-hour dial at the top. Pretty useful, practical. Never seen a counterbalance like this before. Kind of reminds me of an atom, atom description, atom drawing. Sword hands. We've got some red highlights. The blue dial. This looks like quite a light reactive blue dial as well. Maybe someone can clear up on what this piece is exactly. I think Blue Shirt is still in the chat. But it is a very nice color. I mean, we seldom see it such a vibrant turquoise finish. And when we look at the date window, this metal almost looks anodized. So interesting connection of highlights. Looks like a PVD piece as well. So Booz is saying Aragon is one of my favorite Pokemon. Regeneron, Blue Shirt saying. So that's what the underlying, oh, here it is. So I typed in, this is how useful my typing has been. I said prototype Aragon Black PVD. So that was my description of the piece. Really nice though. Nice seeing the color. We don't seldom see such a bright turquoise finish to the watch. So thank you for sending this in, Blue Shirt. I've got to keep rolling. I mean, we're 40 minutes in and we haven't even gotten past B yet. Next comes in from Boris. Boris sends in a Citizen 70s diver. And this looks like a watch straight out of the 70s. I like how he's matched it with his shorts. We get to see this dial. And in the next shot, we get a much better look at it in a bit more detail. But I really do enjoy the cushion case, the integrated style bracelet. It's so peculiar how they did these cases back in the day, where it's entirely brushed, one piece of metal that's been cut. Think about the manufacturing process. This must have been so easy to do, actually. Was it a cost-saving exercise? I have to ask. So I titled it Citizen 70s Diver. And as we move to the next shot, we get to see it in a bit more detail. I really enjoy the bracelet on the piece. Nice and legible, and the color scheme, it's almost like this off-brown orange finish. Another color we don't see. Kind of reminds me of clay, face brick clay. So I need to catch up with you again in the chat. I get so obsessed with the work that I forget that everything's going on in the show. Okay, go to carry on. It seems like it's pretty Texas orange. Thank you for that, Flippin. It's nice when the chat is going on behind, so everyone's just chatting away and I can keep up with what's going on here. So the case being cut, I was wondering would you think this is a much cheaper process as an exercise, because it's just so simple to do? Do I ever go and watch Brighton and Albion games? Giza, Brighton, Hove, and Albion. Is that a rugby game? I don't know. Me and rugby, I kind of understand, but football and the rest, I don't, Giza. You might need to clarify what that is exactly. Me and sports in general, I catch what I can on TV, but that's about it, at this point in time, at least. Okay, so nice seeing this piece. We haven't shared much Citizen watches on the show for a while, and it's great seeing a piece. I feel like this watch is inspired by the 70s. This looks too clean to be a watch from the 70s. But nice combination of elements and highlights and details. Okay, going to carry on next. Thank you for sending this in, Boris. I think he sent another one. This is a Tissot Bridgeport chronograph. Never heard of this piece as well. The brand Tissot is very popular, and it's actually quite important. It's had quite a history. But this, to me, I mean, I look at the bezel, I think, Hanhart. Nice seeing the Romans on the dial. It's another piece that I haven't studied whatsoever. The family in itself haven't studied or looked into very much. But, I mean, it's incredible how some brands have just skirted under the radar for so long. And this piece looks like something that's really taken inspirations from, what would we say, 30s and 40s. Is it automatic? Yes, it is. Date complication. And it's a full, I would imagine it's a cam wheel. I don't know if it's a column wheel chronograph. But the coin edging, as Juan says, reminds me of Hanhart, of German pilot pieces. Looks like it has an onion-inspired crown. Again, sorry about the quality of the image. Might be my end. Saving these images, I don't know, half the time. Okay, going to carry on through. Thank you for sending all of these in, Boris. Next, Maynard in Japan. Are you in the chat? Because your piece is up next. And it's such a good shot. Stover Flieger. I feel like this is 40 millimeters in size, but that blue dial is incredible. And it's also so nice seeing watches on the right wrist for a change. The combination of elements. Talking about Flieger watches, as we will be seeing next week, for those of you who have just joined, I can share what's going to be discussed next week. I'm going to be reviewing and talking about a new piece from the Smiths line. This is the only watch in the world currently. It's the one prototype. Eddie from Time Factors sent it to me before he even had hands-on time with the piece. So an absolute gent. And for those of you who might be interested, maybe you can comment in the chat if you know what this piece represents. But it is a 1-to-1 tribute of quite an important watch, the real, grandfather, the godfather of the field watch in the 1950s. So talking about pilot pieces and Fliegers and all of that. And what's nice is seeing just how Flieger elements were translated into this piece. That's mainly the brunt of the discussion, really. So we jump to this and we see Stover talking about just how the numerals, the minute track, the batons are all relatively the same weight, right? When we look at this piece, they try to reduce it so much so that you could actually see the numerals pretty easily at a glance, but also get a good understanding of the minute track without it being too much in your face. Yeah, so I look forward to talking about it. As you can imagine, it's going to be a long, breakdown of all those details. But these watches are gorgeous. I must say that the Flieger aesthetic is quite the character. Incredible to believe that it's a design that's been around since the 1940s and still goes strong. And as a brand, I mean, Stover has been brought back, and it's great that they're actually bringing the sizes down a bit so they can adapt and be used as day-to-day utilities nowadays. Right wrist forever, Maynard. Yeah, always. I mean, that's just how we do it, you know. And Megan's saying that they're doing some great pieces. They sure are. And if I'm not wrong, they also use ETA movements, so their calibers are fantastic. Watches, their value is great. I mean, you can find them for excellent prices. All the little details, like the date window being the correct color. It's being centered in the dial, so it's much easier to read with all of that. Great watch. Brandon, thank you for sending this in. So nice seeing this watch in the flesh, and such a great shot as well. We really get to appreciate the blue dial in all its glory. I'm going to carry on through. Thank you, Brandon. Next to Bruno. And I think Bruno sent in a Vostok last week, but he sent in another one. And this is the, as most of us know, the Komandirskie, if I got that right. But it's so funny seeing, what I like is how he's managed to match the NATO with the dial and the details. How much do these watches go for? Are they're like $100, right? And this looks to be an original. I mean, it has a tritium dial, tritium hands. These were built for men who were living in submarines. And it's just such a, I really enjoy how, I don't know so much about the star in the middle, but I enjoy how we see, you know, Eastern European design motifs on these pieces, like the numeral choices, you know, that the fonts used. Handset also. We've seen this kind of handset used with a lot of German watches. The bright red accent is nice. It's such a peculiar watch. I would like to look at them in more detail one day. Maybe do a video, like just a discussion around Vostok pieces and discuss their history. Because, I mean, they're viewed very differently by the community. The AK-47 of watches, as Shaitan says. Viewed very differently because they're so affordable and cheap. Many don't like them, but then they are kind of bulletproof. They can pretty much take any kind of abuse and still last, you know? So it's pretty amazing. And it looks like it has an acrylic crystal. This feels to be a watch from like the 70s or the 80s, and it's still going strong. So proof is in the pudding, you know? That is an amphibian, Raymond says. Oh, geez. See, now, if I knew what this said, I would probably be able to help everyone here. So I'm told that it's a Vostok amphibian and not a Komandirskie. But I feel like this was in the title of the email, but maybe I got it wrong. Yeah, you can imagine me getting the names wrong. And Robert saying, thanks for posting the Sky Dweller. Oh, it's a beautiful piece. It really is stunning. It's a pleasure. Okay, I'm going to carry on through. So thank you for sending this in, Bruno. Now we have another micro brand, which is a nice change of pace. And this watch is nuts. So the brand is called Helm. Another one I haven't heard of before. I don't know where they're based. I didn't save any of those details, but I saved the day and the night shot because what he said to me was it has the best loom he has ever seen on a watch. And you cannot argue. When you have a look at this piece, you cannot argue with that. So I'm going to catch up with all of you here in the chat. Robert's saying I'm a jet-setting lawyer. Oh, that's fantastic. So it works pretty well for you, right? You can use the complication. That's great. Amphibia from Matthew. Thank you for that. Again, me and naming things. It's a modification. Oh, geez. Yeah, I wish I could like post a little miniature essay in the corner with every image. It would be great because then I could just read a little list as it goes. So Flip and Zippo, it's called a Helm. Oh, geez, how am I going to say this name? Kura Buri. So it's Khuraburi. I think I'll put it in the chat. So Khuraburi. And the brand name is Helm. Hopefully this helps. Hope I spelled that right. But it's a crazy looking watch, right? I really enjoy the sheer aggression of it. It has Sin-inspired motifs, actually, because funnily enough, we have Zin U50s. I think we have a U1 in the show as well. But look at the bezel and the crown. Even the knurling around it looks exactly the same. But the dial itself is just huge. You could read the time anywhere. And then we can switch to possibly the most ridiculous loom shot. Oh, my goodness. The most ridiculous loom shot that we'll see for the rest of the show, by far. I mean, this thing, let me try and pull out a bit so you can have a better look. It's just above and beyond. It's just so next level. It's almost too much. I mean, even Loom Nanza, as Zane says, sorry. Even the minute track is covered in loom. It's a little bit overdone. Dear Artifact saying rescue beacon. I mean, this probably could save your life for sure. And there was a mention, Pilot Style saying life hack for the channel. If you want to see your wrist shot on the show, but don't want to wait 3 hours, send email as Aaron. Yeah, you know. And if you want to see your watch last, name it Zane and you'll get it. That is the only downside. I think alphabetical helps because we get to, keep some form of order to the watches coming in. But then you kind of have to space it and realize by the 2-hour mark, your watch might be shown. Geez, we've just about to transition over to C, and it's now it's 50 minutes into the show. I don't know how well we're doing for time, but it's the way it goes. So this piece is nuts. And Megan's saying that they make awesome watches, around $300 US. They sell within minutes for every release. I mean, with loom like that, rescue beacon, I think is the best thing I've seen. And Zane saying not enough loom, needs more. I mean, really, they should have actually loomed the logo on the dial. I mean, realistically, it's the most important thing, But yeah, it's just nuts. It's so overdone. It's just great. I think it's fabulous in its excessiveness. Look at it. And you look at the bezel. I don't know what this could be, a thumbprint, but this kind of reminds me of carbon fiber. I don't know. Nice looking watch, though. I think even if you were completely blind, you could still read this piece. Okay, so thank you for this, Cull. Next is Cedar Canoe. And he sends in, he loves his vintage Seikos. He sent in 2 great pieces. So the first, and I'm saying on the left-hand side, it's a Grand Seiko from 1969. Reference, hold on to your hats, 6146-8000. It really rolls off the tongue. And on the right, we have a Seiko Type 2 from 1976. And that's all she wrote. I didn't put the reference in. No. But there you get the idea. They both, this one on the right is a quartz. This is an automatic. They definitely look like pieces from the 70s. And I must say the dial on this watch is quite phenomenal. It looks like it's been worn, bleached in a way in the middle, and how it plays with the light. It's great. And Grand Seikos, I mean, from that time period, you don't see them much. They're not spoken about much either. Okay, I'm gonna catch you. So you're talking about the bezel again, and then the watch, heavyweight wear as well. And this is from Matthew. Matthew wasn't the one who, Cal sent this in. Please don't tell me I got the names wrong. That'll just be a disaster. And the bracelets are also nice, I must say. Nice combination. It's cool seeing two pieces from the 70s, side by side, essentially, next to each other. Very different, but very similar. Honestly, I feel like this piece looks more like a Grand Seiko, just with the use of colors and a bit more of an adventurous approach. When we think of modern Grand Seiko, we think of how they do their dials. This is so bizarre. I think I'm tripping or something. It looks like the crystal is actually a different level because the batons are going all over the place. Maybe that's the case. I think that the crystal itself has like this effect to it. I really don't know. You can actually see it's almost double stepped at one stage because we're getting duplicates in places. Watches. I've only been around for 26 years at this point, so I'm not someone to know everything yet, but it's so cool seeing such bizarre and interesting pieces being shared, and it's nice having this community spirit. I think that's what makes it so fun, is that we get to appreciate what everyone else is wearing for a change, and saying Inception dial. Yeah, that's great. So thank you for these, Cedar Canoe. I think you're still in the chat. Next, we go to Chili Badger. He sent this recently. I love this face. This face is just seeking approval. He's sending, I mean, this is just a perfect shot. He's kind of, the cat knows that the watch is getting all the attention. It's great. So he sends in a Sea Dweller 116600. I mean, if it was me going out to buy a Rolex right now and it'd be a Submariner, this would be the one I would get. This has got to be one of the coolest pieces the family has ever made. And I just love it. I love the fact that it's 40 mils. It still keeps to the Sea Dweller aesthetic, it's very important, but it also manages to modernize it in a way. This was the first piece with the ceramic bezel in the Sea Dweller line, just as we transitioned away from the 5-digit references. And it just sings to me. It looks so good. And I found a video once of someone reviewing his Sea Dweller, this reference. I think he had worn it for something like maybe 8 years or something at that point. And it's his only watch. It's all he wears, and he just can't get enough of it. It's his everyday, and he He just enjoys the hell out of it. Mortica frowns just like that, just like the Addams Family girl. Yeah, it's so cute, man. And the eyes, everything. I mean, look at the expression. It's like a cartoon character, you know? Look at the eyes, the frown, the half. Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, so I just love the combination. It's nice seeing this piece. I don't think we have another Sea Dweller like this on the show. Might be wrong. There are some amazing, amazing watches dotted in between that we will be looking at. The cat is amazing. It's cool, right? I mean, look at that face. What a character. I tell you, animals and their expressions, you can learn so much from them. I mean, think about how cartoonists back in the day would come up with ideas for their caricatures. This is the kind of inspiration that would just spark also. I mean, this is Garfield right here, just the wrong color. I love the eyes as well, yellow eyes. Okay, going to carry on through. Thank you for sending this in, Chili Badger. I saw you in the chat a second ago. We jump to our man Shytown, who is rocking a G-Shock. And, you know, I think this is the only G-Shock on the show, but it's always cool seeing a bit more of a bizarre piece for everyone to see. Best ceramic Sea Dweller for sure, Shytown. It is a really cool watch. It's amazing. It would be the one Submariner that I would buy and own. It is the Ultra Submariner. What am I saying? Do I need more alcohol? Do I need more caffeine? I think I'll do both. So we're getting to this G-Shock. This is a reference DW5600. Don't ask me about the history of these pieces, but this feels like quite an early reference, you know, inspired by the original from back in the day. I feel like this is an homage to an original one, the first G-Shock that came around, just looking at the pushes and everything else. But it's one of those watches that you could take into any situation. Alcohol, Neil says. I'm gonna finish the coffee and then I'll stick. No, actually, you're right. More alcohol. That'll help. It's all about finding that balance in life, you know. Eric Bell saying DW5600. What did I say? I did say. Okay, great. DW5600. You know, these references and these names, you struggle. So the NASA approved G-Shock. Thank you for that, Shytown. So there's the case. This watch can actually go into space and be used. And we were speaking about SpaceX last week, talking about 50s watch design. That was a nice take. Thank you for the Shytown. Going to move on to Chris next. Doing pretty well. We're on C and we're almost hitting the hour mark. Chris sends in a nice selection of pieces, starting with a Marathon GSAR, US government. I think that's really nice. And the one element that I think really makes this quite a... I hope the visuals are okay. I'm not pulling too close into the watch itself on the screen. Maybe I should just hold it back so you get a better shot of the bracelet. The one element that I think makes Marathon watches unique is that radiation symbol on the dial. If I'm not wrong, this is the one watch that does it in a certain way, like this. And of course, we know it's tritium tubes, so this watch will age over time, and it technically is radioactive, so it's really nice. But it is very busy, as I'm going to botch your name, Regina. It is very busy, looking at the 24-hour time as well as standard time. It's very technical. And, you know, I actually spoke about this in the Vietnam video, talking about just how the field watch seems to have been transplanted across into, I think there were Benrus divers back in the day, where you just see the field watch dial in a diver's case. And this seems to be the aesthetic that's followed through over time. Busy, technical, hardcore, but still quite legible. You can read the time pretty easily with those hands. Needle hands or syringe hands are just great, easy things to look at. So Shaitan saying, I saw a doctor who wore a GSAR he received in the US Navy. That's cool, right? This is what I love about watches. You know, watches spark such great conversations just in day-to-day life. You can learn so much about... I'd actually like to make a video about this. The date looks offset, Regina says. You know what? The date should actually be set between... You're right. The date should be set between these two numerals here, these two extensions, but it's actually pushed a bit closer to the 5. I wonder why that was done. Very peculiar. And why the window? I don't understand why brands use windows that are the wrong color to the dial, but that's just me. Talking about watches and people, there's some amazing stories you can get when you just catch someone wearing an interesting watch, and from there it goes. And this is something I actually wanted to bring up about this little Smiths that I'm wearing. Let's see, I'm at Chris. This little W10. I think it is one of the most unpretentious watches there are out there. or there is. I'm botching my grammar now. It's just so understated. Imagine wearing a watch like this into a boardroom, and no one would pay attention to it. And I think there's something so special about it. But the enthusiast will know, hey, this is a really cool field watch from the 60s. And from there, the conversation just blossoms. And, you learn something new about the person who's wearing it. Watches do express the wearer's tastes, opinions, feelings about what they like. And it's a very special hobby. Watches themselves. Megan, thank you. Loved the Vietnam video. It was great to put together. I really had a good time. The recording took about 3 hours to do, and it was hell on earth. I had to dedicate a full day just to get the sound recording right. I tell you what happens behind the scenes. I'd love to get out of my body. Let's jump to the next watch and talk about this. Next from Chris, an RS65 blue dial with a matching NATO strap. I would love to get out of my body and watch, the videos being pushed out without my input whatsoever, and seeing what they're like, because there's always this disconnect between the videos that I make. Sometimes I will catch one. I don't watch my videos, but sometimes I'll catch one, have a look at it, and then go, that's interesting. Why did I think of that thought, when doing it? It's the most peculiar thing watching your own stuff. That's all I can say. I feel like most channels would probably say the same thing to you. Okay, so this is an RS65. We've actually spoken about this recently in the reissue watches. I think the video was called "What are the greatest reissue dive watches?" And this one made the list. It was actually first on the list. Great size. I think everything about this watch was just addressed correctly. Not only the size, but the approach when it comes to price, the attainability factor. Also, the fact that it pays tribute to a reissue from back in the day. All of these little aspects work together in tandem, and you get a watch that's so approachable for anyone. There's a handful, and I think in the family, Oris is one of them that have really managed to stand out from the crowd. I would say the Tudor Black Bay 58 is also in line with this. Same kind of idea of making the watch approachable, easy to attain, as well as being something that pays tribute to something that came before it, And speaking of which, RS65, there's another one, my favorite RS65, that's actually going to be on the show later. It's incredible how you guys work in tandem sometimes. Don't know. Okay, so let's carry on through with, I just found this this chat from, I think, Brick Lane, saying, no one pays attention to my wrist as I drive a 2001 Nissan. Yeah, I mean, driving cars and watches, it's quite a contentious subject. That video about brands and everything else. Okay. Next from Chris, he sends in a Zin U1, believe it or not. We've just spoken about the marathon and other pieces that had that same kind of utility aspect. The Zin U1 is quite a beautiful piece, and the U50 has a similar aesthetic about it. Very 80s in the way it's been arranged. And I say that because we can actually talk about that now in a second. Let me just catch up with you in the chats, because I tend to focus on the watches and then not reach you. Raymond's saying, I sent you a bicolor bronze steel pick this morning. I'm sure I must have saved it then. If you had sent it to me in the last 12 hours, I must have saved it. Otherwise, I've probably missed it, but it'll be used in the next show. So Megan's saying that the RS65 is a great diver, but also overpriced for Oris. And I guess that's probably because it's one of their most popular models, no? Okay, we're going to carry on with all of you here. Please do an outtakes vid, Eric says. Oh, I'd love to do it. The problem is my outtakes get aggressive. The only time when I really start, I make lots of mistakes through the recordings. I trip over my words. I say something the wrong tone or whatever else. He's asking me about thoughts on Archie's Pateks. I'll get to that question if we do have a Patek. By the time we get to Russell, which is a bit later on in the show, quite a lot later. If you stay until then, I'll chat about Patek a bit more. I think Archie has a great selection, but he could trim a few down to get another really nice piece. I think that would be important. So just getting to this piece, let's discuss the U1. The one thing that I find fascinating about the watch is the dial architecture, the use of the types of batons used with the handset. This looks to be like we've now moved away from the 70s, where we have proud indices on the dial, and we've now jumped to indices that look almost, how do you say? You could say they're almost streamlined syringe hands. very hard and aggressive, but you still get a good idea of what they are. The relationship shared between the hands and numerals also, not numerals, I'll say batons. Very interesting. Even the hand, the actual seconds hand, has a square element to it. And altogether, it's peculiar. Yes, it's very polarizing, but altogether, it makes it such a functional looking piece. And looking at the bracelet and everything else, this watch does such a good job at being able to create its own stance as being this utility watch, really built for purpose, being used and thrown into a washing machine and still going, you know. Marcella saying, I think I know which is your favorite RS65. Yes, Marcella, I think you sent it to me. I think you're the one who sent it to me. I remember it being linked to someone with the name of M. That submarine steel there, Buganish. It's incredible. Such a nice watch. Also the highlights, I'll also say. It all plays in so well together. Zinn as a brand is so underrated, and I can't wait to do more videos around the brand in future. Design really plays an important role in this family in particular, which is why I like them. I think a lot of other brands just ride on their laurels. They don't necessarily bring anything new to the table, but it looks like Zinn is constantly trying to think about how their pieces adapt to the environment that they are designated to. And for brands to survive, I think it's so important, you know? Yeah, so we're going to carry on through. I think this is also from Chris. This might be the same Chris. I don't know. This is a different Chris. And now we jump from you know, we've looked at some amazing pieces. Now we jump to a Timex. Timex Mercury, new old stock from 1978. Also really like the shot. Nice seeing this companion jacket and everything else. So when would we ever say that we would see a Timex using Breguet style numerals? It's so clean. It's a really nice looking watch. And I can't imagine what these pieces cost. I don't know. Timex, again, I'm not someone to deal with prices of watches in general, but incredible that you can get a Breguet setup on a piece at this price from the 70s, new old stock, still looks great. And you have to second look at the watch to tell that it is a Timex, which I think is also pretty fantastic. Thomas saying great numerals. Show the Smiths again, Worm Germ says. Which one do you want to see? Let's jump back. So Chris at the Timex. So the little W10 PRS 25, W10 on a G10, because it just has to work that way. I love the lume on this watch. It is phenomenal. It's what actually really stood out to me when I was playing around with it. Seeing how well this watch illuminates and just how legible it is with this layout. It's incredible. For such a simple piece, you wouldn't expect such a legible lume set on the watch, but it looks amazing. And jumping to the reveal watch that I'll be sharing with all of you. Again, you can take a few guesses at what this is. For those who are interested in the hobby, I'm sure most of you know what it is, but it's a faithful recreation of a very special model from back in the day. And the review is coming out on Wednesday, so I look forward to that. Hand wound, wears like a gem. I've had it longer than the creator himself. One of one prototype, so pretty nice seeing it. Dino, I don't know if you're addressing that to me, but you know, I don't have much whiskey left, but I'll try my best. Problem is, you know, you kind of sober up when you're doing this. You have to use your brain a lot. This exercise, it's not as easy as it looks. So thank you for this, Chris. And next from Clint. I don't know if Clint is in the chat or if he's here, but he is a South African expat like myself. He's living in Oz at the moment, and he sends a gorgeous shot of an Explorer Polar. The reference 16570. Look at the condition of this piece. I think the setting in general, the gray sleeve, the background, everything just works so neatly with this piece. This could become the cover photo for the show, but I thought the Breguet needed to get some airtime, you know. What a stunning looking watch. It really is, even though it was an outlier, and we might as well just say Archie Luxury really pushed this watch into the mainstream for all of us on this platform. It really is a gorgeous thing. And it's so legible. The way they've arranged the batons, the actual handset, everything, how it contrasts against the dial, black and white, the stark contrast. Also really enjoy this shot in particular. You see that the Cyclops is framed in such a way that it doesn't, you know, mar your image of the dial itself, the visuals. And that also just completes the photo so nicely. So we have some South Africans out there who also love their watches, and it's great. I mean, I sometimes get some awesome emails from you mentioning that it's so nice hearing a South African talking about watches, because generally that's just not on everyone's minds. What a cool looking watch. Really is nice. And thank you for sending this in, Clint. Hope you're enjoying your time in Oz. It's a great part of the world. And we were just saying Theo and Harris sells T-shirts with that handset. I've noticed they work with handsets, and they also look at date just or date windows. It's a nice scheme, actually. It's a nice idea. I was thinking of bringing out a T-shirt, but I have no idea what I could possibly put on it. Maybe create my own artwork. I can use a pen quite well. Maybe sketch something nice and scan it in and make, I don't know, some kind of conceptual drawings that would be cool to look at. Who knows? But for Julian saying for South Africans, yeah, Julian, you didn't say that very well. I'll say it better for you. Let me just type it. I don't know how would I. That is the better way to say it. So thank you for that, Julian. You tried very hard, but that is a closer way of saying it. And for anyone who is South African in the chat, I think you'll enjoy that statement. So Shaitan's saying, do you use fountain pens? Never. I can talk about that now, actually. But first, let's jump to Clive. Clive actually sent in a watch last week because we were talking about 1950s pieces. And he sent in his Rolex, reference 6546 from 1959. I feel like this is a watch that he has in his collection. He picked it up. I mean, we know that Clive does enjoy his vintage pieces. We can talk about pens. Funnily enough, you would expect someone who uses pens often to, what does it mean? It basically means go defecate in the corn. It's the best way you could describe it, Boozer. Defecate. What the hell am I saying? I can tell you, I really try and be as PG as possible on this platform. If you meet me in person, I don't speak like this normally. So talking about pens, fountain pens, the problem is the refilling. Because I'm left-handed, ink has to dry on the page. That's also a hassle. I would struggle with smudging and everything else. So no, you would find that most industrial designers in general, use disposable pens. We use the simple things like Bic, just any kind of felt tip pen. So once you're finished with it, throw it. I mean, it's sad to say, but we use mostly disposable stuff. We don't use anything of high value, which is peculiar because since you're enjoying the penmanship behind things, you would expect there to be some kind of like tradition and tie to all of that. But no, mostly we just use pencils, very disposable Bic pens, because generally when we're creating concepts, you can create anything from 250 to 1,000 concepts on pages. So you use up a lot of paper, a lot of ink very fast. And that's the moral of the story. Megan saying, T-shirt with ID Tribe on it, don't you think? I don't know how I could best illustrate a T-shirt well. I was actually thinking of an idea of making a mug that kind of links to the show and have a heat diffusion. You know how the mugs change color to heat? So have the logo on it, but then when it changes color, we have a whole series of watches underneath. That might be something nice. I don't know. Still thinking of a few ideas. When the world wakes up, we can think of how to best utilize production. Anyway, the 6546 Oyster Perpetual, we can see that this watch has the Explorer elements that we would expect. It looks very much like a model that accompanied the, well, we could imagine. It's the kind of watch that would resemble the Hillary expedition, the watches that went up Everest. Would have been nice to have seen a piece like this used back in the day, but of course, they just used a standard Oyster Perpetual with batons all the way around. Nice looking piece. Also enjoy the engine-turned bezel. We don't see this very often, James Conn saying, T-shirt with Fisherman's Friend logo on it. I need sponsorship. If anyone represents Fisherman's Friend, that would be great. Where do these come from? I don't know. Richmond Hill, Bournemouth. Someone's based in Bournemouth that's linked to Fisherman's Friend. That would be cool. I mean, as a sponsor, I'd love to feature you. I can't do these shows or present in general, even doing recordings without you. So you've saved my life a couple of times. So thank you for this, Clive, if you're around. And next we jump to Cole, and I really like this shot. So he's rocking a 216570. Funnily enough, we've just seen a white dial 5-digit reference. Now we see the modern one. He's wearing some latex, and he's in his car at the moment. But seeing it on rubber kind of works pretty well together in a setting, you know. Let's get this closer up and catch up with you some more in the chat. Looks like there's all sorts going on. Emily's saying coin-edged bezel, and I think we're talking about that Rolex. Yeah, it's gorgeous, really nice. So Fisherman's Friend, that cracks me up. Bezel's cool. Biltong, that would be nice. For those of you, Absolute Bore saying Biltong would be good. But then it's the shipping and it's the storing and it's the, you know, let's rather stick with dry goods instead of, you know, things that can go off. It's not about Fisherman's Friend, it's my passion for sure, Shytown. And Curtis saying t-shirt ideas, a series of 5 logos, 9 drawings of 5 most iconic watch designs. I mean, that's it, Curtis. That was my thinking. The joke is, of all things, I can practically draw any kind of product or a house or anything like that pretty well. But with watches, I struggle, you know. There's so much complexity with these pieces. And there's when you see how watch designers manage to illustrate pieces that go into production, the conceptual drawings, they are just beautiful. And it's not just knowing perspective and just how you will arrange the drawing in like an isometric way. It's also just understanding the level of depth to everything, not just the case, but the bezel, the crystal, inside the actual, the rehort, the height of the hands and everything else. It is such a technical thing. So if anything, I would be drafting the watch in 2 dimensions. I don't think 3 dimensions would be as good of a final result, but yeah. Absolute Ball, that was a good line there, so I can applaud that one. Nice friction hand, as Eric Bell says. Yeah, nice looking piece. We've spoken about the Explorer so often, but the orange highlights is great. The accents, everything else, really nice. Rubber on rubber, or latex on rubber, nice to see. Going to carry on through. Cole, thank you for sending this in. And we're going to move on next to Dear Artifact, who should be in the chat, I think we saw him a second ago. And he is rocking, funnily enough, Smith's Everest. Another piece. And yeah, it's been so cool. I can chat, and funnily enough, Eddie is up next, so we can talk about the Smith's brand a little bit more, and just I'll try and explain what he's managed to do with the pieces that he has managed to create. It's phenomenal. He is a one-man band, and he's able to recreate these pieces by himself. I don't know how he does it, but really the focus and the attention to detail, there he is, Dear Artifact's in, awesome. So Dear Artifact, always a pleasure sharing your watches, and your shots are just ludicrous. I only saved this one, by the way. You did send me a great one with Ian Fleming, but I decided I need to try and cut as much as possible and keep it just linked to the watches. But this is just, I mean, you can literally see the grain of the jersey. I don't know what the resolution is. It must be at least 4K. Smith's Everest, ladies and gentlemen. If you know me, you know this channel, I talk about them way, way too much. Yes, another Smiths. How soon is now, Chili Badger? Well, next week you'll be seeing a nice review of a one-of-one prototype that'll be coming out August, September time. So that should be fun to talk about. But anyway, let's get to Eddie. Eddie, the owner of Time Factors. I said to him, you know, Eddie, I run a show every other week discussing Wrist Shot Week, a time when we can all submit our pieces. And this is his, called a PRS 45. And it's basically a tribute watch to a Blancpain chronograph, or Blancpain. I'm never going to get that name right. So this is the piece on his wrist. I think it's about 42 millimeters in size. He's really gone to the lengths to try and recreate all the little details. But he also sent the technical drawings of this watch, so we can get a better understanding of the piece and how he basically prepares them to get manufactured. And in this video where I talk about the next watch that's coming out, I also mention the tech drawing. I actually feature it. But here is an example of a model. So the brand is Precista, and Precista came in just after the Smith's brand or the CWC. I don't know. They were in around that timeline. Here's an example of a tech drawing. I should have technically blacked out some of these details. I don't like sharing descriptions about sizes and scales. I think that's quite important for someone to keep. So you'll see in the review video, I do black out a lot of details. Excuse me, the case size, 50 millimeters. I don't know if that's, I think that might be lug to lug length. The size of the watch itself is 42. But technical drawings, I mean, this is not your most conventional method of how you would arrange it, but here is an example. If it was me critiquing it, no drop shadows. That is so frowned against. But as a rendering, you get to see the two-dimensional image very well and understand just what the bracelet and the buckle is going to look like. This is more like a presentational tech drawing. This is definitely not the detailed stuff. But here's an example of what he sends out to get made. Great to see. And as always, Eddie, you've done such a good job with your watches. I don't know if you're watching, but we've been chatting through email, and it's amazing how one person can create such a huge variety of pieces over time. This Time Factors has been around since '96. So basically, what, 23 years at this point, 24 years, still going strong. And, you know, the Smith's watches sell out within 5 minutes, which is ridiculous. It's just ludicrous. I really commend what he's done. Again, such a gent that he was able to send, again, I'll pull it up one more time. He sent this to me before he even was able to put it on to wear. That's how diligent he is. And I really appreciate that. To actually entrust me with a one-of-one prototype, but also for being someone who can just go that extra step to make the experience just all the better. So I look forward to talking about this piece next week. I'm going to carry on through after Eddie, and we jump to Elliot, who sends in, surprise, surprise, another Hoya Carrera caliber 5. And yeah, this is the second one we featured on the show. I really like the flowers in the background. Nice offset. I saw that Russell joined the chat. I haven't spoken to you in the chat yet. Let me just scroll up and get back to you all. Let's have a look. King of Kludge, good to have you here. Interesting name. Megan saying, dear Artifact Photography. Yeah, it's incredible. Again, for those of you who, I'm sure we've gotten past Dear Artifact already by now, but he has an amazing Instagram page. So really follow him on Instagram if you can. I might as well just put it in the chat. I hope I'm going to spell this right. Artifact. Follow that link on Instagram and you'll see his photos. He has an amazing collection, very eclectic. He has quite a taste for field watches and utility pieces. His dream is that Tudor brings out a Ranger this year, which seems to be the case. I think he might have cracked the code. Okay. I'm going to carry on through with the pieces on the show because as it is, Russell, it's good to see you. I've saved all the watches that you sent in over the last 2 weeks, so we will be having a look at those in a second. And when I say a second, I would say maybe an hour from now. So Hoya Carrera, Tag Hoya Carrera, another model that we now see has batons on it. This is the kind of model that we would expect from the family. The first one that we saw had numerals, much more like a Portuguese, where this looks to be the more conventional style piece. And I'm actually surprised that the Carrera came without chronograph pushes. I always thought the Carrera was the racing watch. So maybe someone can explain in the chat as I go through why the Carrera name also had just simple, was this something that Tag Hoya introduced? Or was this something that also came along with the Hoyas back in the day? Was the Carrera only linked to the racing chronographs of the time, or were they also worn just as simple time-only pieces? Don't know. Nice looking watch though, very simple, elegant. I think the case styling is something we can assign to Tag at this point, or Hoya watches. They have a very distinct form to them. Great looking piece. I think the photograph is also fantastic. We get a shot of the sun there, the setting's nice. And we're going to carry on through. Next, we actually have a fellow family member in the chat. Clive is on. I don't know what you said because it sells watches. Yeah, it always, whatever sells, it sells. I didn't catch that line there. But next we have James, who we know, founded Timeless Capital. Megan's mother, Erin, she shares a Cartier set of eclectic things. So we get to see that, if I'm not wrong, these are all linked to Cartier in a way. I'm definitely not someone who knows all the styles of the jewelry, but I think this is called a love bracelet or something. One of these are. But we see how the diamonds have been set in these watches and just the accessories in general. And it's incredible to see just how neatly it's been done and arranged. The way everything's been laid out. I really enjoy the fact when a brand can actually approach diamond setting, I don't know if these are aftermarket, but diamond setting in such a way that it's relatively understated, doesn't stand out and really, you know, flash in your face so much. And they almost have a matte effect in certain lights, you know, a diamond encrusted nail, flip and zipper. Yeah. So this is a Cartier bracelet. I need to know more about it because I definitely am not in that line of things. So maybe Megan can give us some more details there. But yeah, it's a nice set. And as a collection, I really enjoy just how the diamond setting has been approached. Again, there is a way to use diamonds, and then there is a way to not use diamonds. And this is very subtle, understated. And I mean, in a way, it almost looks muted from a distance. You wouldn't even be able to tell that they were set, which I think is just that extra little bit of detail. So thank you for sending this in. I think, Megan, you sent this to me, but this is your mum's set. And again, James, founder Timeless Capital, he's been struggling over the last few weeks, but he is making a slow recovery. And I hope he's going to be with us very soon. I really hope to reach out to him, have a phone call, catch up with him in the future. Yeah, it's been a nuts. The last month has been pretty nuts, all over the place. So thank you for this, Megan. You sent this in. Next, we're jumping into Ezekiel's piece. Surprisingly, another Tag Heuer. See how it comes in threes and fours when we start talking about brands. This time, it's a vintage piece, and it's a reference 844/5. I would imagine this watch comes from the 90s era, where we have kind of looks like an 80s inspired piece, actually, with the way the case has been done. Cushion styled, with lots of brushing around it. Really enjoy the finishing, and we have a tritium dial, and we get the same standard sub format. I would imagine these watches were very sought after back in the day. Maybe someone can give me a bit more detail about Tag Heuer at this time. I feel like this was kind of early 90s, late 80s maybe. But on the whole, it is, you can see where it's taken its inspirations from. I do like the way the cushion case has been used with the piece. Reminds me of CWC, actually, very military-esque. The strap also looks like it's seen a lot of abuse in its life. So yeah, great. So I'm going to leave this on for a second while we get to the next, what's going on in the chat. Talking about eclectic collections. The most guarded crown I've ever seen, for sure. Let's get right in and have a look. So this reminds me very much of, were they CWCs? I feel like they were. CWCs that were inspired by Omega divers given to the MOD. And this was one of the approaches that they used. This case styling looks so much like it, actually. Very overdone. But at the same time, I mean, you can just see the expression on the dial. I would have liked to have seen no Mercedes hand and just a rounded plot instead. But as a combined piece, interesting. Again, we haven't seen many Tag Heuers on the show, so it's nice. I'm asked, do I have the best ratio of how many months of salary should your watch cost? Is it okay to save for a watch? And as you ask that question, I'm going to jump to Fauzi next. Thank you for this, Ezekiel. I don't know if Tanku or Fauzi is in the chat. I feel like he's driving a Mini. This is a Mini Countryman that he's in at the moment. But he's wearing a Daytona. This is a reference 116520. So just before we transitioned across to the ceramic. But I just, what I love, and I think the reason why he captured this, there he is, Tanku's in. The red highlights with the rubber and the steering wheel. It's such a nice combination. Again, the quality is not the best. Might have been my saving of the image, but I'm going to leave this on for a second and try and address this question about, is it okay to save for a watch? I think it's so important, actually. Dude's car's backwards. Well, right-hand drive. Yeah, that's where we are. Different side of the world. You know, I can speak from my experience. I've just tried to find my enjoyment out of certain watches over time, and eventually get to a point when I was really keen to pick up a watch to be something that really represented the channel. I guess I approached it a little bit differently to everyone else. Should I jump to another watch, or should I leave this on for a second? I don't know. But I think it's very important that you save and you spend so much more time looking into pieces. I feel like nowadays, because of we get to see everything on show. I mean, this is probably a good example. People feel compelled to jump into a watch before really considering it. You know, spending some time, taking a few months to really think about what the watch you want represents. And I've tried my hardest, but it's still, I don't think it has hit home for everyone yet. But I want to try and really, maybe in the future, the next few months, focus in on trying to get across how best you pick your watch for yourself. One of the most defining features, I'm going to move away from Fauzi's watch because we're going to be here all day. Thank you for sending this in, Tanku. It's really always a pleasure. Rubber B strap for anyone who's interested. Frank sends in a really awesome shot of a Hulk Submariner. What I try and bring across, and I hope that many people try to catch, is the watch itself needs to be something that continually pulls you back for another reason. There needs to be another element that calls back to you, because there can be a time when you find a piece that you really like for one aspect, but then there's other times when you can find a watch that you just constantly feel like there's something new to it every single time. And there's a great example, actually, at the very end of the show. Zane shared a perfect example of a watch that I think exemplifies that statement. It's a Patek Philippe, but it's a very important Patek. We've actually featured it on the show in the past. But it's that kind of watch that you can look at and get drawn into for a different reason. That's one aspect. There's so much to talk about, really. And let's see, that's the importance of a small collection. Flip and zipper. I mean, I agree. I think, when it comes to wearable pieces, they're watches you wear every day. You can appreciate them all the more because you get to wear them all the more. They can experience more things with you. It deserves a full video. I could sit for 20 minutes and try and break down. I think that's what I'll do, actually. It's a great suggestion for a video topic. Trying to explain just how best you can go around buying a watch from a more emotional side of things. Not so much the value, the price, the retainability, the resale, all that rubbish. Just about the watch that you want to get and why. Asking the question why is such a fundamental nowadays with everything that you do. And for watches especially, you're spending so much money on something. Really ask yourself why you're getting it. What is the reason? Is it because it costs so much? Is it because you could wear it every day and be happy with it? There's many things. There's so many layers to the hobby. But yeah, it gets deep. So Frank sends in this Hulk. I really like this shot because we get to see it in such a good lighting here. We get to see the bezel nicely set. We get to see the dial. One of the best dials that Rolex makes, bar none. The Hulk Submariner, I'm sure many of you know. I've never had such a good relationship with it because I feel the ceramic hasn't been addressed as well as it could have been when you look at things like the Harrods edition with the more olive finish to it. But as a color scheme, it's very nice. It's appealing, very striking, I'm going to catch up with you in the chat because I just talk and talk, so it goes. Let's see, talking about Morrises and Minis. Brahmi's saying, my dad's car is worth 500 and his watch is 12. And I mean, that's it. It's the thing about watches is that they're objects that you wear every day for the rest of your life. Cars, on the other hand, depreciating assets. They're not assets at all. Depreciating objects. And it's just the way it is. Okay, I'm going to catch up. This talking about Nissans and everything else. Okay, I'm going to scroll down and keep focusing on the pieces because I'll get drawn into the chat and then that's the rest of the show. Okay, next up, how cool is this? This is kind of the reason why I featured the Smiths in a way, because we're going to be seeing a legitimate 1969 W10. This was issued to the RAF, and I thought, it'd be so nice to see an original with a re-edition of the family. And I think he has given me some movement shots, so we can have a look at that in a second. And for those of you who would like to know something about the distinction between the originals and the reissues, I can actually show you. If you're interested in the W10 and this piece, it's a beautiful watch. It's such a great machine, really. I've really been drawn to it over the last few days. So the one way you can tell, made in England is what is said on the originals. You can also notice that the tritium on the dial has faded and it has a T hallmark. That's the easiest way to find a distinction. We jump to the, oh no, come back. Got a lot of Rolexes we're going to hit just now. We jump back to the re-edition. We notice the difference here is that it now says Great Britain, and it doesn't have faded lume on the dial, and it has an L for luminova. So, C3 luminova instead. That's the easiest way to tell. Funnily enough, there comes a time when you look at some of these and you get a bit confused with which is the original and which is the re-edition. So that's the easiest way to catch it. And let me get back to it quick. Such a nice looking watch. I mean, really, as this understated utilitarian piece, it flies. I mean, it's 36 mils. It's so small, under the radar. No one would know what it is. And talking about the Explorer, yeah, I kind of botched that. Shaitan saying cars are depreciating appliances that spend 23 of 24 of the days unused. Watches spend time on your wrist. Yeah, it's important. I think it's an important distinction to make. But then talking about some watches, some cars, Russell, some gain value, some depreciate for sure. I mean, it's unreal. And there was a mention again, it's awesome. I'd like a lot of people to know your opinion about the journey of choosing a watch. I plan on doing that. Actually, over the course of this week, I'm going to sit and prepare a discussion around it because I think it's so important and try and attack it from a different way. Don't know how I'm going to do it, but it'll probably be a write-up. So expect it in a few weeks' time. Okay, Clive, element made by lesbians? No, sir. That's not the distinction. I don't think they would have that on a military watch. So nice seeing this piece in its full glory. Also having a look at the back. This is a good way to tell where it was made exactly. 1969 is the distinction, and all of these hallmarks talk about the designation of just where it was supplied to. Somewhere here it would mention the RAF, but these pieces in the 60s were supplied all over the place, the UK especially, and we can have a good look at the movement as well. What made these watches so great and why they were so popular, field watches, they had these iron cages to protect the movements from magnetism. So important because, as we know, if you're sitting in an old plane, the amount, just planes in general, magnetic fields are everywhere. It's such a clean looking watch as well. It's been well looked after. From 1969, Smith's W10, an original. Great seeing it on the show. I think this is the first time we've actually featured one of these, so it's always a dream to have such unique and specific watches on. So thank you for sending these in, Freddie. Next, we're going to hit a 54 Omega bumper. This is a non-Seamaster, by the way, another small detail that you don't see very often. So I'm going to catch up with the chat again. Let's see what's going on. And as you can probably hear, I'm losing my voice. So, Fisherman's Friend, call on you to help me out. Thank you. I've got a few left, so that's a bonus. I hope I don't choke on it. That would be the worst thing. So people joining in from Australia, Super Steel, great having you here. The original Smiths had fixed spring bars, Orange Hand. I don't think they did. Maybe they did. Let's have a look. I really don't think that. Ooh, they did. And the way you can tell is the strap. Wow, that's pretty impressive. Thank you for highlighting that. Maybe it's just the angle, but I think these were fixed. The way you can tell is that these straps were secured by these little clasps, and they were literally just fold over pieces of leather. So how he's managed to keep the strap in such good condition as well. But then again, we have a NATO. So I think these were definitely fixed, but he also has an original leather strap for the watch too. Whoops. I'm going to be botching around with these images. The Magic Trackpad has a mind of its own half the time. How often do we see a non-Seamaster Omega from this time period? Bumper case from 1954. Really clean, really nice. Voice lost. No, Ryan, I'm gonna hold on. I think it's whenever I drink whiskey, the voice seems to struggle a bit. Also need to lower my my register a bit. So I don't know. I'll try and lower my voice a bit more. When I get excited, I tend to go up in the volume a bit. So Emily's saying I have a 1947 Omega bumper with a 2819. I'm guessing that's the movement. Oof, it's amazing. It's amazing. Clive, you can leave your comments if you want. Really, for anyone who's deleting, I've noticed that sometimes people delete their comments and things like that. It's okay. Keep them going. I like reading botched comments. It's always good. I try and keep the channel as clean as possible, but comment section it can always be a good time. So actually saying military watches normally have fixed bars, yeah, for sure. I feel like they were welded on just because they were supposed to be used with NATO straps, pullover straps instead. So going to carry on through here very nicely with a 50s Cadillac, as Shaitan says. Yeah, that's cool. Ben, nice seeing you again. I saw you at the beginning of the show. You were one of the first to comment. That Omega would go well with a whiskey, for sure. I think this must be a, maybe it's an 18 karat. Maybe it's a 14 karat. I don't know. Maybe it's a 14. Back in the day, they were quite stingy with their use of gold. So looking at it, it has quite a steel finish. I didn't highlight the gold number on the description. Looks kind of like a steel finish. So maybe it's 14 karat. Gorgeous looking watch though. Very nice and simple. You can just see everything so well laid out. We're talking constellation era. We're just about to transition to the constellations and have them popular. So that's fantastic. So Gavin, thank you for sending this in. Next from Graham, we get a bit of color. Ooh, look at that. So we have, I don't know, bougainvilleas or something in the background, and we have a Zodiac watermelon. I've spoken about Zodiac highly as a brand that seems to be taking the right control with what they're doing, producing some amazing watches, Okay. Let's see what else is going on in the chat while I try and avoid choking and swallowing on the Fisherman's Friend. Would John Draper wear that Omega? For sure. Clive, Chi-Town is talking about Clive. Is he Jewish? Somehow I don't think so. Solid Soap, thank you so much for the super chat. If I knew what currency that would be, that would make more sense, but really it is absolute, whatever it is. Thank you so much for sharing and for sending some money in and donating to the page. These shows are always a pleasure because, again, it's not me who's doing this. It's really you who are submitting these pieces and being a part of the show. And that's what makes it such a pleasure. It's such a fun exercise because even for me, it's Russian roulette. I don't know what I'm going to see. And for all of us, we jump from pieces like, $200 Timexes to pieces that cost 15 times that amount, in a second. So talking about the watermelon, I think this is one of the most interesting colors they've ever thought of using. Very 70s inspired. And we've seen that some Super Seawolves in the family have been a lot more literal with their translations, using the same color schemes. But this one, I think, is unique to the modern variants. I might be wrong there. But we have everything from a silver champagne dial. We've got these gorgeous green highlights, this pink outline. It's so funky. It really is fun. And watches, you should not always have watches that are serious. Me being someone who loves military and mainly divers and sports utility watches, they aren't exactly fun for the most part. They're very hardcore. But this, as underachieving watch collector says, great summer watch. I mean, this is just, you can wear this by the pool. And this would attract so much attention, actually, even by those who aren't necessarily watch enthusiasts. Getting someone into the hobby with something like a Zodiac, great way to start. I mean, look at it. So much fun to wear. I'd actually love, if I had a kid in high school, I'd give him this watch to wear around because it's just, stylish. Carrying on through. Let's see. Talking about, Clive is chatting to Megan about Rolex references. Megan is an authority when it comes to vintage pieces, by the way. So Chip Wong saying, hi, guys. Yeah. I went to boarding school, so you can imagine the fun that happened behind the scenes there. Okay. Angus on that Zodiac. Don't know. Angus Jubilee. It does look like it. I think these are standard. I think these are standard that come with these models. Gorgeous watch. And I love the photo. The setting, he's really managed to capture every element of the dial, the layout, the details, the background. It looks so good. Thank you so much for sending this in, Graham. Always a pleasure. Free Zany Poo. Yeah, Zane, you've been a bad boy. You've really you've made people very angry. I can't say I caught up with the show. I sometimes try and jump onto to live streams, but most of the time, I generally don't watch channels because that's all I do. Most hours of the day, I'm either writing, recording, doing what else. And I struggle to think, okay, let's focus on watch channels again. Sometimes they're good for inspiration to look at certain subjects, but otherwise, yeah. Going to carry on through. Thank you, Graham. We have another Seiko coming in from Gregory, and this is a reference. It's a Presage SRQ031. Fascinating looking watch. Looks like something straight out of the 70s, and he's even got a really old school looking bracelet with flat end links. We see the 70s inspired dial, the batons around it, really nice and clean. And this looks like this bezel can actually be rotated as well. Reminds me of, those old school pilot chronographs in a way. It has that kind of language around it. It has some sort of a pipe hand dial to it as well, champagne subdials. Never seen this Presage before. I mean, Seiko, like Zin, it's just a whole new world. And Clive's saying, not really a watch channel. I mean, the thing is, there can be a moment when there's a question. And the problem is the questions just don't come in hard enough. There's some amazing questions that are directed to Archie. And when that happens, it flicks the switch, and then we're suddenly talking about great references and watches in general. So I don't know. It's always a mindset thing. When you go into the live show, I try and just tell myself I'm focusing on watches. That's what the show is about. That's what I've tried to make the channel about. Focus on watches. And that way you can't necessarily deviate away when you're stuck. Okay. So Gregory, thank you for sending this in. Nice seeing that sheer contrast between elements. And I'm going to catch up with the chat one more. The GS like hands, Boozer says, for sure. It's actually something I wanted to mention. These, what would you call them? Dauphine-styled hands, very much like a Grand Seiko. And the Presage line is kind of the step up from the standard Seiko pieces, right? A little bit more care and attention. I didn't even know there was a date complication on this watch. Amazing. Really is nice. As an overall piece, I think the way it sits, being something that's legible, easy to read, looks stunning. Next, we jump to Gunther. Gunther sends in a selection of Seiko pieces again. We have SKXs. Don't know what this is a Seiko. Might be. Another looks like it has a few SKXs with a few modified elements to them. And we've jumped to Seiko modifying community again, which is a nice change of pace. And I think he sent in a few more. So this is one, and then this is the watch in the light. This is quite cool to look at. Don't ask me how he managed to do the bezels and all those details. Even the rehort is gold. Interesting color scheme. Very peculiar. The Seiko modding community is a world within itself. So Worm Germ saying that Seiko is a reissue of a 1964 chronograph. Thank you for that. Feels kind of like that time period too. That's great. Thank you for that detail. That was from Worm Germ. This is actually a reissue. Definitely does look like a watch from the time, for sure. And catching up with everyone's chatting about watch references, and Zane was ratings gold. Yeah, Zane, you really were. I mean, I've heard there's been all sorts of talk. You've really made a big impact in the community. Lots of discrepancies about your collection choices, and I just find it. Actually, I do remember that catching that one point about talking about other people's watches. I don't understand the concept at all. The idea that you can judge a person by the watches they collect, and that the person is collecting wrong, I just don't get it. Doesn't make sense to me whatsoever. You buy what you like, you wear what you like. Who the hell cares? And I really hate it when ego gets thrown into the mix with watches in general. These things are something that you should enjoy above and beyond anyone else, you know? Okay, so going to send these in, and then he also sends a Sin U50. Would you believe? We've already looked at a U1, but now we look at a U50 loom shot. And I think he gave us another. Oh, my goodness. So here is the U50. I tell you what, it seems like there's always a time when things come in threes or fours. Here's an example. We've already looked at a U1, same aesthetics, same details. Didn't see the loom. So we get a better understanding of how everything is set on the dial, and it's great. It's nice to see that lined up. Onwards and upwards, NATO. Yeah, Les, we can chat about it more, actually, about just people and watch collecting. It's such a... I find it funny how when people don't have idea for content, they tend to jump on talking about other people's watches. And I'm just like, you know, what's the point, really? They do definitely highlight the person's tastes, but they are their things. So why in the world do you need to criticize or judge them? Chip, thank you so much for this. I love your icon there, Chip. It's a Rhodesian Ridgeback, right? Thanks for another great show. Always a pleasure. Second fund to resupply Fisherman's Friends. Don't worry, I'm stocked up. With the bug going around, I've stocked up on Fisherman's Friends because they would save my life. In the event that I did catch the bug, I would soldier through, keep making videos while going. Greetings, fellow watch humans. Mason, good having you here. And there's just all sorts going on, talking about references and chats and watches in general. It's great. I think we can all make fun of 33mm APs. Yeah, Boozer, that was quite a news break, I must say. That whole story was pretty eye-opening, actually. Sad, but eye-opening. I really try my best not to get involved with watch politics because I just think it's can get quite ridiculous. Gunther, thank you for sending these in. Really nice selection of pieces. And we have more Seikos. Can you believe? These just keep rolling in. So the dude's name, Hardesty. That's how his email was addressed. So I really cannot for the life of me give you his name exactly, but we get an idea. This looks to be a Seiko 5 that's been modified in such a way to look like an SKX on a Jubilee. But that loom is stunning. And again, I can't believe how we're seeing these things in threes. You know, we're seeing all these Seikos. All of a sudden, we're seeing Zins everywhere too. That watch is a Zin or a Sin. Nice one, bud. That's a low blow. Bear Clooney, has he actually? I love watching Bear's talks because he just says it on the nose always. I'd actually like to have a look. I haven't seen his channel for a long time. I'd like to look at what he's been sharing lately. So I just called these Seiko Mod. This looks like a Seiko 5. It's been modified to look like an SKX. Again, more modified pieces. It's always great seeing some variety. So Hardesty, thank you for sending these in. Next, we're jumping to James, and lo and behold, wouldn't you believe, things come in threes. We have another Smiths featured on the show, Smiths Deluxe, called the Everest Expedition, which is a much more faithful rendition of the Everest Smiths piece that was sent up. Not exactly, but close in a few things. I think the one element that's different is the red handset, a few other little details, but the Everest Expedition, this model is supposed to line up very much with what Hillary took up Everest back in the day, powered by Smith's pilot style. It'd be nice. I really would enjoy its sponsorship, actually. It would be nice to have some kind of partnership with a few brands one day. I don't know. Whatever happens, whatever helps pay the bills. As it is, running the channel, as some people have mentioned already in previous videos, I don't know how the 400,000 subscribers doesn't equate to a full-time salary. That is total BS, by the way. No, I mean, I'm scratching the surface, but I'm making a livable wage doing what I'm doing now. So I don't know how, anyway, that's a discussion for another time, but it would be nice to get some sponsors in and talk about brands. Again, I'll say with these pieces, oh God, Smiths again. I find it amazing how these pieces have been able to, they're made by one person, so well executed. You have to have the watches in hand to understand, but you know what I mean. Going to carry on through, and wouldn't you believe, James, I think this is the same James, he sends in, we have another shot, 2009 Marathon GSAR, another watch that comes in pairs. And this one looks like, since it's from 2009, it looks like the tritium is starting to go a little bit over tropical color. We can see the colors have changed a little bit. Looking at the 12, it looks like it's gone a bit of a tan. The watch is being put in, I think he took us on a hike, if I remember right, put in a waterfall. So, God forbid, he's actually using his watch in the water, which is freaking no-no nowadays. SAS, Rami says. I think we're talking about the marathon. I don't know. It's another thing. If you'd like to direct your comment to me a bit more, tag me in the chat and I'll be able to see it easier. It doesn't even look like you need to actually comment at. You can actually just type in, as you see my name in the video, IDguy, capital I, D, and G. Put that in, you'll be able to reach out to me, so it'll work. Clive saying, have I tried talking with Govberg? You know what, Clive, I would love that sponsorship. I would have the best time in the world, and guaranteed, if I ever was partnered up, if someone from Govberg is watching, I would make the best possible write-ups I could on any watch that you give me, really go in depth. I would absolutely adore it. It would be the most incredible experience of my life. Being able to actually sit across from Tim Mosso would be great. I'd love to have a one-on-one talking about watches with him, sharing, dropping some knowledge and chatting about what we like, our tastes and everything else. I won't be mentioning jingly janglies though, for sure. Next from James, he sends in a Ball Roadmaster Skipper. Ball watches, official standard since 1891, excuse me. Two-tone finish, and Ball watches seem to be pieces that many love because of many reasons. It's an old, it's a very old brand, and he's going to be talking about one ball, two balls, yeah. Boycott Watchbox. Hans saying, love my writing. Thank you, Hans. The last time I studied English was in 12th grade. I didn't study any kind of English in university, so this is all just pretty much winging it and hoping you're getting somewhere. But it would be so good, as Zane says, verse master Timmy. Tim is, I don't know how he does it. He is a full-on dictionary. He is a dictionary when it comes to chatting about pieces. And NATO saying it would be a proper seizure as well, for sure. We'd be talking for 3 hours straight. He would be speaking at 5 million words a second, and I would be struggling to keep up. Also, just jumping around topics like there's no tomorrow. So yeah, you see, we want no balls, two balls, blue balls. We knew it was going to happen. That's just the case. Thomas Burnett, thank you. No, really, it would be amazing. It would be so cool if someone from Watchbox is in the chat. If someone would like to reach out to me, my email's in the description. It would be so nice. to have some kind of partnership there. So that's just me throwing it out there, like it would happen. It's a pipe dream. I'm definitely, with what, 28,000 people. It's not exactly, I'm not pulling in the numbers, but I mean, I hope the presentations are good. Yeah, so Bull Roadmaster Skipper. So basically the idea here is talking about a watch that seems to be one built for engineers in a way. Roadmaster kind of links to engineer pieces, watches that were used for the train lines, for example, but then Skipper links to the bezel being something that could be used as a dive watch. So it's a blend of two things. Nice looking piece. I think more watches should incorporate these proud bezel inserts where the numerals are set ever so slightly up. A bit more tactility. You can actually feel the numerals, which is nice, but then it also gives a great effect. Yachtmaster-ish. That's the first thing that comes to mind. Rolex Yachtmasters. Clive, you can see my ball. That's great. We have fun here, Jay sends in, so thank you for this, James. Jay sends in a BSH. Okay, I'm going to try and get this right. I'm sure there are going to be some awful acronyms in the, or initialisms in the chat. Brotherhood of Submariner homage. That's what it stands for. And it uses an ETA 2836 with a custom dial. We've actually featured a few of these. I think we looked at an NTH the other day. Are these all related, these brands? I really don't know. As I said, micro brands seem to be very popular. They're popping up all of a sudden on the show. But just start saying the ball is in my court. When it comes to reaching out to Watchbox, I have to make the moves to them. They won't come calling me, but as it is, would be nice. So we have a Kermit-inspired, this looks to be like a 5513 dial with 369 Explorer dial layout. 10th anniversary. I know less than nothing about this brand in general, but nice combination. I can't say the Kermit is a watch that really grabs me, but in total, also notice that it's a acrylic crystal because of the severe deviation we see. I mean, this could either be really bad Photoshop or the crystal is a super, super high dome, as you can possibly see here. But it uses gilt dials, gilt hands. I'm sure Jay just enjoys wearing this piece in and around as a watch that he just throws and uses everywhere. So that's cool. Bud just, I love that balls in my court. Baby frog. Yeah, quite nice. So the reference to this, if it was a Kermit, would be a 16610 LV. And this being one inspired with a Explorer dial. Yeah, don't know what you would call that reference, but it's great. Thank you, Jay, for sending this in. Nice seeing the green. Again, we see the green and gold are used. I think of the Seiko Alpinist all the time. Next to Joseph, he sends in a nice selection of pieces. Now we're going to get to some pretty heavy stuff. Okay, strap in. We've been running for, almost, 2 hours at this point. Now we're going to see some heavy watches. First off is a first-gen Planet Ocean loom shot, which we seldomly see. Really like how they addressed the way the date window is arranged here, because as you can tell, it has a baton that's easy to read, glows in the dark. The date window is sitting in the corner here, but there's symmetry to the dial. They did a good job with these Planet Oceans. Again, inspired by my 1957, but otherwise, pretty good. They've taken some inspiration there. Megan saying that Archie's first in line. For sure. Archie needs to ask and beg and plead. Eric Bell, back to Smiths. Rolex, that's great. You guys, it's always good. So loom, it's always nice seeing loom shots, as Thomas says, I think, he mentioned that. Great seeing the piece in its form in the dark, because these watches, the reason why you buy a dive watch for the most part, you want to see that loom. You want to see how legible it is. And then we jump to the next piece in his collection. Heavy hitters, more like Smiths to come. You guys are on fire tonight. So next up, this is a gem. 1675 on Jubilee. Now, the other week, we actually used this watch in the show, but it had a really eaten up suede leather strap. And he said everyone was making fun of it on the show. So I put it back on its Jubilee. And this is a very clean 1675. I find it amazing that the condition of these watches vary so much. Hans mentioning that the Planet Oceans are underrated. They really are. The originals, and Boozer says he likes these Planet Oceans above the ceramic ones, because the ceramics sizes are a bit different. The aluminium bezels are definitely cult watches at this point, I'm sure. So yeah, this piece you can see has been used in its lifetime. It's seen a lot of exposure and weather. And the 1675 line in general, they vary so much when it comes to condition. I mean, I've handled one that you could say is basically mint out of the box. One thing to notice, which is good, is that the case condition of this watch is amazing. So I don't know if this has been Joseph's watch his whole life or if this has had a previous owner. You can tell this watch has been worn heavily, but hasn't been, used heavily. It's definitely seen some sun exposure. We've got some jingly jangly going on, as Boozer says. The bezel itself has seen some fade, as you can probably tell at the blue. The dial looks so clean as well, apart from the hands. And speaking of which, I'm going to be talking about a Smith's watch, but I'm at a later stage, and talking just about how non-radium dials have managed to withstand the test of time so much better because they just haven't corroded the elements on it. So yeah, and GMT Master commenting, that's great. Leon the professional. Okay, I'm going to carry on through because we're going to be sitting on these for so long. So next from Joseph, he sends in a casual Mark II 214270 Explorer, as you would expect. Nice looking piece, plain, simple, elegant. We've chatted about this at length. Get a good understanding of the dial in this shot though. So I'm going to leave it here to stare at you for a second while I hit coffee or whiskey. In the chat, C for coffee, W for whiskey. What do you expect? What do you recommend? I'm staring at them both, thinking to myself, and everyone's just chatting about anything and everything. It's great. Like I'm running a show and everyone's chatting about like Voldemort and everything in between. Whiskey, coffee, whiskey. Lovely. Richard Roder says A. That helps. Thanks. So whiskey has it. Cool. Stick with whiskey. Let's get the buzz on. Mark IIs. I really do enjoy the fact that they loomed up the dials nicely, and the numerals themselves also got the same shot. I can't deal with vodka, Raymond. I can deal with tequila much better than vodka. Or what's my Jägermeister is my absolute favorite. Jack Daniels and Coke, Irish coffee. Yeah, I could just mix the two. You're right, but then it's iced coffee and it probably tastes kind of. So yeah, it's great. These Mark IIs, they really hit the ball out of the park. The only critique I have is the size and scale of all the parts. If they had to bring it down ever so, what they could have done, maybe they will, they probably will never do this, but a domed bezel on this watch would visually make the piece look a lot smaller on the wrist, which is amazing. A bit of visual trickery, and you can actually bring in the proportions of a piece visually just by how the bezel plays with the light. As you can see, the way it spans flat across, very difficult. You notice that it's easy to track, but once it's domed, which we'll probably see on a few Pateks later, bringing in the light and the shadows a bit closer to the dial, it allows for it to look a bit smaller visually. So thank you for this, Joseph. Next, we have quite a few. Come on, Mouse, work with me here, sweetheart. We have, oops, no, come back. Here we go, back to it. We have two. Don't ask me why we have two, but we have two gold Daytonas. And maybe someone can highlight the reference in, I feel like it's a 116-319 or something. I know it has a 19 attached to it with the rubber strap. Reminds me of that the Big Eye reissue with the rubber strap equipment linked to it. Milgas is my favorite. Yeah, they really are cool. Hands Knees a service, as Megan says, talking about the GMT. And Megan is an aficionado when it comes to GMT watches. So really mentioned, it's great. People are still talking about whiskey in the chat. It's good. You guys are really being so supportive of my my drinking habit. So twice as good. How you managed to get two of these, I really don't know. But what a combination. Let's get right in on the dial and have a good look. This is beautiful. Now, I've critiqued the Daytonas before. Most of us have. When it comes to the amount of text on the dial, it's just so excessive. But the complementary nature of the gold and the black together, it's actually very understated, which is crazy. You wouldn't really expect to say that when you're dealing with a gold watch, but the ceramic on black dial brings down the brightness of it a bit, and the rubber strap does the same thing. Thing is, when it comes to arranging photographs, it's difficult to like the magic trackpad. So it's a beautiful thing. Gets in the way of productivity. One for work, one for play. One to flip, one to keep. I mean, that's it, right? Rest in peace, liver. Thank you. No, I'm a healthy guy, which is a good thing. I'll be around for a bit longer. All my grandparents pegged in their 90s, so I'll make it. So next from Joseph, he sends in another selection. We have our 1675 again on the Jubilee. You can see how the bezel has faded over time. But we move down to, and I never get this reference right, a 5122. What the hell? It's Pilot Chronograph from Patek Philippe. It's a monster of a thing. Many people don't understand why this watch is a part of the collection. It just doesn't really line up with pieces in the line. But saying that, I think it's, you know, when I think of the name in general, and I look at this watch, I feel like it's reminiscing and paying tribute to World War I pilot watches. Those numerals on the dial looks exactly like watches that we would see worn by pilots. Just the aesthetics of that time. And Zane mentioning it's a 5524G. Thank you for that. I knew it was a 2 something. It definitely looks like a piece that's inspired by, you know, early 1900s and really the first real wristwatches, which I think is great. As for all the aesthetics, with the pushes being backwards and everything else, I don't know if that works just as well. There's a few details that I probably would have liked to have changed. The size and scale, yes, it's a pilot watch. Quite nice, though. I do like the combination. It definitely does call back to those old school pieces. So in a way, it does deserve a sitting where it is. But now we're going to hit a heavy hitter. Travel time. It's a travel time, not chronograph. Thank you for that, Thorsley. Oops. Again, when it comes to running the show. So it's a travel time, local home. I should have. And that's why the pushes are backwards, because it's using the same complication that you find in the Aquanauts and the other Calatravas. Thank you. Thank you for that. It's not a chronograph. Wake up, buddy. See what happens when you ask me to drink whiskey. Okay, next up, we have one of the biggest heavy hitters of the show, one that we absolutely adore, and it is the Historique American from Vacheron. But before we get to that, let's have a look at what's in the background here. Those of you who can't see past the bokeh, that looks to be an overseas tourbillon. So it's incredible. I mean, it's such, and it wasn't the focal point, which is, I think is great. Maybe we'll feature it again in the future, but what a beautiful watch. I think tourbillons, when they're done right, amazing. But this is the real showstopper. I think of all the watches nowadays, this one, look, it's really anachronistic. The styling is so old-fashioned. A cushion case with Breguet numerals, Breguet hand, offset dial. So sadly, I would never be able to wear it. The one watch that I really love because of its quirkiness, this one I can't wear because I wear watches on my right wrist, but it's a stunner. It really is amazing. So I said 1928, but I think it's a 1921. Vacheron Constantin Historique American 1921. I think that's the name. Get those confused. But the idea was this was to be used by racing drivers. Racing drivers, anyone in that kind of field or just drivers, a driver's watch in general, wearing gloves, as we spoke about earlier. It's a 1921. Thank you, Rooted. So Brian Goldberg, you are kidding me. Brian Goldberg's not watching the show. Come on, guys. Are you pulling my leg here? You are, no ways. Brian Goldberg is watching the show, ladies and gentlemen. This is a monumental moment. Welcome, Brian. I'm in the presence of someone pretty special here. This is, whew, okay. We've been chatting about Goldberg, chatting about higher. Geez. Anyway, I'm not going to address the chat. You guys have fun, talk away, have a good time. It's a troll, possibly not. I don't know. Just again, getting back to the Vacheron. I love the way that the subdial has been placed, offset, easy to read. I really feel like it is a troll for sure. I mean, that's great though. What a great way to pull my leg. You know, I'm half cut running a show, and I'm. That's great. You guys always manage to pull things out of the bag. Yeah, so this is definitely one of the showstoppers for sure. Love the details. Love how peculiar it is actually in today's day and day. And now Tom is telling me no, he isn't. No, it isn't. It's a troll. You see, you guys are the best. Thank you, Faux Goldberg. Amazing. So yeah, in its form, it's such a peculiar watch, but because of it, it gets a tick in my book. I really love these callbacks to history. Going to move on. Also really enjoy the crown placement. Looks superb. Okay, JT is next. Joseph, thank you for sending these watches in. Please, in future, send more. We want to see this tourbillon Easter egg, as someone mentioned in the chat. This needs to be featured. What a beautiful thing. Next, we have a collection from JT. Now, I'm trying to remember the context here. Sometimes I just get sent collections and I don't know if it's linked to the show or if it's someone actually wanting my advice. I struggle with replying to emails at the best of times. So this has been sent out. What a cool looking set. Let's have a good look at these now. Again, I need to catch up with all of you in the chats. Talking about, Megan's mentioning references of Rolexes that you have. I love the Brian Fauberg. That's great. You guys are so good. Send more Smiths, yeah. So let's get to the collection that we see in front of us here. And again, I don't look through these watches at the most, so it's nice seeing a set that we can all enjoy together. So we start with the top section, and just here alone, we have a collection in itself. Just the 3-watch collection, done. So it looks like we have a first gen. Is this a 36? Ooh, this looks to be a 36 mil. Is it? No. I'm going to say it's a Mark 1 214270 Explorer. Oyster Perpetual 39, white dial, one of the best Rolexes out there nowadays. I want to make a video on this piece. Smiling, self-winding, so it's ETA-powered Tudor, one of the first models in the family. Then we have a modern approach with a steel bezel, which is nice. Great combination between these two. Planet Ocean, stunning ceramic bezel. I feel like this is the 39mm variant because it's the same size as these two, and it looks like the proportions are pretty correct. Then we have, this is a mid-size. No, this is a full-size 42 mil. These could probably both be 42 or 43 mil and a 42 mil professional Speedmaster, which is great. Then we jump across to the 2254 Seamaster, underrated watch for sure. This was in my running of pieces that I wanted to get. It's gorgeous. IWC Mark, I always get these wrong, Mark 18. Very much inspired by those original Fliegers, but also uses field watch elements to it, which is great. A Nomos Club, I think it is. Hamilton Intramatic. I do not know this name or this brand whatsoever, so someone might need to help me here. I don't speak Russian. And then we have an Oceanus Casio. On the whole, nice collection. I mean, the top row, really cool. Nice set. You can see he definitely has a taste for field watches and everything else in between. But just looking at the selection in general, we get a good understanding of, oops, Juan, you've just been spoiled. We get a good understanding of what he enjoys in his watches, something that is relatively non-polarizing, you know. It reads arrow in Russian. Thank you, doctor. And there was a mention, I think someone actually mentioned me in the chat, Chip Wong asking who would feud with me. Yeah, Chip, I try my best to stay away from politics and all the rest. There's been a lot of that going around lately. And in the end of the day, we're in this for watches. I think you join this page to look at watches. It's a nice thing to stick to, you know. So I don't know what everyone's chatting about, Casios, and yeah, it's a nice collection. It really is cool. And Running Man, I think your watches are going to be coming up very, very soon. All in all, I really like how he's managed to, all of the pieces, they are not in your face. And he's the kind of guy who wears watches that are toned down because he doesn't want them to necessarily grab attention. And these definitely manage to stay under the radar, low in profile. 12 watches of that level would drive me bananas. 73 MAF, yeah, that's another thing. I mean, when does it come down to deciding what you want to sell, what you want to keep? If it was me and I was toning down the collection, yeah, I would say probably get rid of these three, the Hamiltons. I don't know. You see, it's my taste and it wouldn't line up with everyone else's. The Nomos Club, I think this is a club though. There's mention that someone's saying I don't hate the Nomos Club. I do like the numeral layout. Reminds me of the Vacheron 56. Chatted about it last week, talking about 50s inspired pieces. But great collection through and through. I really enjoy how the Explorer has been paired with the OP39. Oh, fantastic. We get a good idea of bezels. Here's a perfect, we were chatting about this earlier. 39mm with a flat bezel. You see how much wider the watch looks because of it. With a domed bezel, how it actually curves the light, it immediately makes it look visually like it's pulling in and bringing the scale down ever so slightly. So Tanzil asking me, welcome Tan, it's great having you here. Would like to know a perspective of watch collecting in South Africa, trends there versus UK. You know what, Tan? South Africa is not, it's not a wealthy country, I can tell you that much. And generally people just don't do it. Amazingly, I've been able to connect with a few people who have either lived in South Africa or who have left over time. Let's move to the next piece. JT, thank you for sending this in. As I talk, I'm going to page through Juan's collection because Juan loves sharing just awesome pieces, and his West Perpetuals on the show. So in general, coming from my background, I only started wearing watches when I got to the UK because of the weather. And it's nuts to think that because you just don't realize what time zones are like here and what season you're dealing with clouds and overcast weather. So keeping track of time is important. South Africa, time zones don't change. You know, the day and night, 7 to 7, sunrise, sunset for the most part every day of the year. And because it's so hot, that climate, you just generally don't wear a watch. Another thing that's important, crime is huge in South Africa, as many would know. And you just don't want that kind of valuable item on you if you can avoid it. So watch collecting in South Africa is a dead stick. Also, let's talk about exchange rates. This Omega that I bought probably cost in excess of 100,000 Rand in South Africa, or at least 80,000 Rand, which is ridiculous. And you haven't even added VAT and shipping and transportation, all of that on top of it. So buying those watches, ridiculous, that part of the world. There are a few people who are lucky enough to be expats who have traveled out to South Africa, who live there now. What a gorgeous looking OP. I'm just going to keep scrolling through these as we go. Wouldn't you believe we get another Explorer 39 with it. Juan, your photos are incredible. You always send us great stuff. Here's another example of seeing just how a flat bezel works with a domed bezel. So coming to the UK and noticing, you know, I'd say, quote unquote, arriving in the first world, all of a sudden you realize just how much more money there is in the world, because people have been dealing with the correct currency all their lives. They have been able to save up. They've had watches given down to them. It's funny because in the Southern Hemisphere, it doesn't seem like that happens very often. So it's pretty amazing. The UK, US market compared to, and Europe in general, compared to the Southern Hemispheres, very different. And there's a select few people, I think, in those parts of the world that really love collecting. I mean, believe it or not, I was chatting to a neighbor just today. She gave me the number of a family friend who he's collected everything in his life. And he recently got rid of most of his collection just to pay the bills. And I'm going to actually hopefully phone him next week, chatting about Patek, minute repeaters, and the full story. Watches of Switzerland actually consult with him in the UK about secondhand grey market prices on very collectible pieces. So yeah, it's amazing the connections you make and the difference in the world. I must say it's nuts. It isn't the real Brian, as Hans says. Yeah, we're kind of struggling with with working out if it is or if it isn't. Okay, so going to carry on through, and Richard Road is saying dead stick. So Tanzil saying thank you for sharing. Geez, my perspective. Geez, you know, hardly a perspective. It's like it's a very poorly thought out mention. I'll read it through. It says, thank you for sharing the perspective. We hear a lot about Asian, European, American buyers, not so much about African. It's peculiar. One of the guys on the channel at the moment, actually, Fauzi Tunku, if he's in the chat, we actually lived up the road from each other back in the day. And you wouldn't believe, but he has an amazing collection. And he spent most of his life in Malaysia, if I'm not mistaken. But you know, he travels out to South Africa and he has an amazing collection of pieces. You just don't know. Your neighbor could be collecting watches, and it seems like quite a common thing. The person up the road from you, there he is. So Tan, you can direct your comments a bit more to him. He knows what it's like with watches in South Africa a lot more than me, for sure. Because you know, if I can't afford the things, I didn't really get into it until I could actually pay for something and start getting into the hobby. Anyway, I've been chatting about it way too long. Juan sending in a 35mm Yachtmaster, his wife's piece. What a great piece for a wife to wear. And we've spoken about this a lot. The simple, toned down, basic use of the platinum bezel. It's very understated. It can fit any woman's wrist. It's really nice. And it has that it reminds me of the 90s in many ways. sporty elegance to it. Very functional, useful, but at the same time, it could be used everywhere. Has a nice bit of flash and bling, but yeah, so Shaitan's saying, I had a neighbor who bought a 5513 sub back in 83 at a PX when he was in the military. See what I mean? And you just don't realize until you bump into these people, and you just, I can tell you something else. If I get the moment to comment on someone's watch, I've done it often actually on trains and all the rest. I saw someone with a Batman Jubilee a couple of months back, actually last year, somewhere around there. And I just said, nice Batgirl, I said, and he sort of winced and we started chatting. And apparently he's also a collector. Obviously he collects the Rolex pieces, but that's the way it is. Carrying on through, Juan sends in his Panda Daytona after a dip, which is always nice. We actually used this a lot on the show that we chatted about. 2 weeks ago, we were speaking about it. He has both the black and white dials, which is nice. Just here, Junior Johnson, are you on your way? Good having you here. We've been running now for what, 2 hours and 20 minutes, and I've been talking way too long, but actually we've done a good job, because I think we'll be able to stick in around the 3 hour mark. Truth Fears is joining. Great to have you. And yeah, still going. Let's carry on through. So Juan sends this in, then he sends in Julian. This is from Julian. Thank you for those, Juan. This is a watch that really caught my attention, as I'm sure most of you can tell, because it epitomizes the word texture everywhere. The bezel, the dial, it's beautiful. So it's a linen dial from 1983, date just, with a bark bezel, they call it. And I mean, this really was a sign of the times, you know? So nice and clean. And I love the fact that it's gold on gold. You really get to, when it comes to looking at the watch in its entirety on a leather strap, it looks so toned down. Reminds me of Get Carter. I think that's probably one of the best. Clive's saying he prefers the latest Starlin dial. Love to know what that looked like. But champagne or satin dial, linen dial, excuse me, very much looks like it. I mean, the textures were just amazing back in the day. I really wish more brands could play. The only brand that we really know that plays around with texture nowadays is Grand Seiko, for the most part. They're ones that really like to push the boundaries in that area. Rolex is resting on their laurels with a lot of their watches, with the bark bezel, and yeah, it's great. What a nice combination. He also sends in a modern OP36. So we've seen a few Oyster Perpetuals on the show this evening or this morning, wherever you are in the world. Catching up with the chat. A golden linen. I've never seen one before as a set. It's really nice and clean. Rolex X-Lax, Park and Jack dial. Yeah, for sure. I mean, if Adrian is around, I mean, this is the kind of piece he should be getting. And then maybe get some kind of insignia on there with your logo. That would be cool. But a bark bezel. I actually noticed on Instagram that he's just sold his Grand Seiko 9F. So he's saving up for something. Get Carter, it's a great film. It is really cool. I watched it, I'd say a year ago. It's a lot of fun. I mean, how can you not like my cocaine? He's good. My cocaine. If you want to say it how he would say it, say my cocaine and you'll get it right. My cocaine. So OP36 with the Explorer-esque dial. We've seen this a lot before. But this blue dial is so nice and clean. I wouldn't say it epitomizes the brand. It kind of does. The blue is a little bit polarizing, though. If it was a white dial, I would say it speaks more to the brand. But when you have a watch that represents the Rolex name, I think this one is a pretty good example too. It really does manage to stand out. And as a 36, you notice how the case works. Very squat on the wrist. Probably wears a lot bigger than it looks. My cocaine. Yeah, I knew that was starting. So thank you for these, Julian. Next, we jump to Ken with a tag. I feel like we've actually looked at this exact watch. I mentioned we had a golf watch earlier. I feel like this is the exact same one. And we went to the extra length of actually putting a golf strap on it just to add that extra bit of kitsch to the the formula, you know. We're going to carry on through. Let's see what else is going on in the chat. Truth Fears. My real name is Maurice. Michael White. That's cool. My cocaine, flip and zipper. Yeah, for sure. Good call selling the Seiko. So rooted, yeah, I must say that the 9F, it's a strange piece. The whole idea of taking that Explorer aesthetic and You know, I do like the accents and the use of colors, but I think they kind of skimped in a few areas. They skimped on the bracelet. They could have done a lot more focus. And Megan's saying, "You're cracking me up." We have the best times here, Megan. Really, the watch community. We enjoy sharing. Sharing is caring, as always. So yeah, Tag Heuer Golf. I feel like we've actually featured this exact watch. Might be wrong. Maybe there's a bit of a difference. Golf inspired, as we can sum up golf colors. I think it's a little bit heavily done, actually incorporating the livery on the dial itself. But who's to say? Formula One related. Thank you for this, Ken. We jump into Chrono Craze next, and he's dealing with another. I hope this is a micro brand. The brand is called Visitor Park Vale. Please, someone tell me what this piece is about. It does have a few tricks up its sleeve, which I will share with you now. He's given me some great shots. Would you believe it actually has an officer's case back, which is pretty cool. Thomas saying, I don't know if anyone already identified the Russian watch. It's called a Strela, the arrow. Thank you for that, Thomas. No, no one did. There was mention that it means arrow on the dial, but not that it means Strela. Thank you for that. It's great. Needs a golf bracelet. It's cool. Okay. So we're going to carry on through. So this piece, Visitor Park Vale. Now, what caught my attention with this? This is from Chrono Craze, by the way. It might be in the chat, actually. We look at the organic nature where the so-called plots work on the dial. We have these three points on the quarters, a pole router-esque divide, and then these teardrops on either side. It's so peculiar. It's absolutely bizarre. So we have a rail dial that runs around the outside. We have squared hour and minute hands. We have what looks to be a GMT hand, maybe a second time zone, I don't know, running seconds. No, we don't. That's the running seconds. Sorry, I got confused with the pole router. But then it has these Nautilus, there's Chrono Craze, great. Then we have these Nautilus-inspired shoulders, but then it's also like a cushion case, because we see how it's been arranged where the lugs are set underneath. It's one of the most peculiar watches I've ever seen featured on the show, actually. And let's get to having some fun. Let's look at the loom. Holy smokes, that is cool. Like, this is what I find perplexing, is that the watch looks very industrial, okay, on the outside. The case and everything else, very, very hardcore, industrial, heavy duty. But then we get to the actual dial itself, and apart from the hands, it looks so organic. I mean, dealing with teardrops and dots, for Pete's sake, you're looking at something that looks like it deserves a much more flowing case instead of something that's hard-edged, you know? Megan's saying that the Visitor Watch Company, awesome. Vale Park Officer with a hunter case design by Phil. I haven't met Phil, Megan, but it sounds cool. And I think Thomas has been talking about Visitor before as a brand. So if someone can explain a bit more about the family, that would be cool to know. But I have never seen this in my life. But this is the best part. This is what I love. It has a proper officer's case back with a really substantial hinge. So let's have a look at the hinge first off. Look how heavy duty that is. It's got some gorgeous finishing on the inside, and then we get to see the movement and the rotor. It is such a peculiar watch, must say. Vale Park, Indiana. Okay, now I'm starting to remember. So it's made in Indiana, Visitor Watch Co. Officer with the case back. It's great. Also really like the way they've fixed down the sapphire crystal with these screws. That's also nice and neat. And it has, believe it or not, very Blancpain-esque lugs, you could say, or also kind of reminiscent of Patek's from various lines. My family know the company very well. Thank you for that, Megan. It'd be nice to meet them and get involved with understanding the styling of the case, because I find it so perplexing. The case to me just doesn't correspond with the dial at all, but that's just my 2 cents on the topic. Because I just feel it's so hard-edged. And when we get to the actual dial itself, it's so much more smooth and organic. I feel like it would serve so much better if it had almost like a pebble aesthetic on the outside, where it's really smooth and organic all around. Looks expensive, mentioned by Ricardo. Maybe it is. I really don't know, but what an interesting, peculiar, I think this is one of the most peculiar watches we have on the show. Actually, no, we have Russell's watch to talk about peculiar. So Chrono Craze, thank you for sending this in, always good. And the rotor, also took me a second to realize, the rotor has this embellishment here, but it also has wings on the side, if you catch that. this region here on either end. So it's not just a dead set heavy weight in the center. Very peculiar piece. Next, we're jumping to another Seiko, because why not? Another Seiko, would you believe? We've featured a Presage that looks exactly the same as this. So this is a reference SPB129J1. Really rolls off the tongue well. And I'm going to take a hit of whiskey because I got that right. Seiko Presage with a almost Grand Seiko Peacock GMT inspired design, or so I say dial, not design. But we spoke about a chronograph that looked exactly the same. In fact, it borrows the same case, the same bezel. We actually featured it on the show. I mean, telling you, you guys work in groups, and we get another RS65 coming up next. Megan's saying that all the watches are under 1,000 USD. Talking about the visitor pieces that we just looked at. Not silly money. That's cool. No. So Chronocray is saying, got to get back to work. We'll check out the whole show later. Oh, it's a pleasure. Pleasure having you here. Thank you for sending in your pieces. I don't think I say this enough, but I can't thank you all 2 hours into the show. I mean, who else is watching? I can't thank you all enough for submitting your pieces, because it's really you who make the shows possible. And that's all the fun. And I mean, we get to experience and see such bizarre things. What whiskey am I drinking? So Monkey Shoulder, the dregs of Monkey Shoulder. And it almost killed me the last time I had it. So surprisingly, it's working. I think, you know, I should maybe dilute some Fisherman's Friends inside it in the future. Worm Germ, that's your Seiko. Is this you? Thank you for sending it in. Looks great. And yeah, most peculiar dial. I mean, it's beautiful. It reminds me just like the Peacock, which is one of my favorite GMTs from the Grand Seiko line. I think it's so unique. So yeah, we're going to carry on through. And we're going to continue with Marcello. And if Marcello is still in the chat, he sent too early to, it's never too early to drink whiskey, Marcello. You're up next with your RS65. And it's my favorite RS65 of them all. So he tells me, I think this was one of the last photos I actually saved. Dad's gift. His dad gave him this watch, and this is what started his craze and his interest in the hobby. And it's such a cool watch. I think it's awesome. I didn't actually express it well enough in the video. Talking about reissue watches a couple of weeks back, dive watches in particular. I love the negative space, and I love how the numerals are arranged on the dial. It is just so bonkers. It's something you would never, or Orpheus, as thank you for that, watch and pray. You just can't imagine a brand going to this length to create such a peculiar looking dial nowadays. These numerals are just so fun. Sadly, you couldn't send us a loom shot. Maybe next week, if you could, Marcello. I love the way the dial has been done with it, because it's just so peculiar and quirky, and just lines up exactly with pieces from, you know, I would imagine this is like 1968, 1969 inspired, kind of. Yeah, it's cool. And also another small detail is it even has a date complication here underneath. I think the one element that people complain about is that the Swiss made gets in the way of the minute track that runs around the inset of the dial. And if it was me making improvements on this watch, I would probably put the minute track around the numerals itself, because it looks kind of peculiar. But everything, you know, down to the bezel, it's just such a funky thing. And it really does speak of that time. I love watches that are time capsules, you know, that represent designs of the past that are, you know, so out of date nowadays, but, you know, we can still rock and wear them. It's awesome. So there was mention about this. It's 12 o'clock somewhere around the world, and Megan's agreeing. It's great. And Truth Fear's mentioning, I'm looking at to get the original bracelet. Oh, for sure. I mean, the original bracelets are just as cool, you know, with hollow end links and the rivet style. I mean, this is all you really need. If you wanted a dive watch, I just think it's such a lot of fun. It's awesome. One of my favorites in the reissue family. Speaking of which, we are jumping to Mark next, who sends in a 2254, which we've looked at already. And again, an unsung hero from the brand, for sure. And don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be looking at a Moser in a second. And some amazing stuff coming up, really. Everything from high horology to vintage pieces. It's all coming up next. So the 2254, paying tribute to the MOD Seamaster, I think they really should. If I could, what I really want to do, actually, I would love to get in touch with the CEO of Omega, if possible, one day. and just say, bring out a reissue, some kind of modern re-edition of the MOD model. You would make such a killing. In fact, I think that's how they should have reintroduced, that should be a James Bond watch. If they could bring back the 60s MOD pieces, what's the reference? Always get it wrong. I'm not even going to try. A 154, that's how the reference starts. It's amazing. Such a cool watch on the wrist. I've had some good wear time with one in the past. And this piece manages to exemplify it with the sword hands, with the big triangle 12. The one element I would replace, I've said many times, the bezel insert, a little bit cartoonish for this model, but all in all, it's just such a looker. The date complication, you don't even see that it's there. It's just fantastic. Unsung hero. And these are still extremely affordable. You should have a look for these online, because you can get them for what, like $2,000, and excellent value for money. You get your money's worth out of this piece, I think, as an homage, but also a modern piece. And there's also talk about quartz. I think some of these do come in quartz, and they are very affordable as well, even more affordable, you know. So I'm going to carry on through to Marcus. So Mark, thank you for sending this in. Marcus is next, and he sends in a Moser Pioneer, some very abstract shots, so we get to enjoy the dial and all of those details. And Megan's saying that he does have, I know that you do have his number, and I'm definitely not going to tempt you to to send it to me, but yeah, it'll be nice to reach out and chat to him one day and talk about his watches and what he's managed to do. I mean, don't get me wrong, the re-editions are cool, the reissues and the limited editions, but I mean, dig deeper, get into one thing that Omega does better than most is they listen to the community for the most part and build watches around that too. So I'm seeing what else is going on. Chipong saying Omega needs to, just counteracting that. Omega needs to produce more limited edition models. Yeah, it's ridiculous. They need a proper, like a standard run of the original Seamaster 300s. And Thomas saying, you're doing great. Have another drink on us. It's Saturday night. I sometimes forget it's Saturday. I forget that it's weekend. The day is just melded into one. Thomas, thank you for the super chat as always, man. Thomas is, how can we explain Thomas in the watch community? He is always there. I mean, if he was the only one watching, it would still be an entertaining show, because Thomas is always a part of, just shows in general. Always there. Such a gent. And I haven't emailed you back, have I? I'm the worst to tell you. Thank you, Thomas. It's a pleasure. And I will take a hit while jumping to another shot of the Moser. So this is a Pioneer, Central Seconds. And I think if, who else has one of these? We actually featured this on a show a few times. Oh, that was a big hit. This stuff really does hit me. Monkey shoulder is rough, as you can probably tell. Downward swig. Who else has one of these? N something has one of these, a Pioneer. It's a gorgeous watch. This is really what established the brand as they came back with rubber straps and everything else. And a few more shots. Moser as a brand is very underrated, and I think they're going to pick up pace. What did I mentioned Moser apart with McLaren, actually. And definitely they have the same kind of cues in a way with the way they're addressing their products with the Streamliner and the Speedtail McLaren. Again, watches and cars. It's a cool video that came out last week that the algorithm killed dead. So let's carry on through as we keep rolling. I don't know what's going on in the chats, but it seems like there's lots of wait, a hit. Watch and pray. No, not a hit of no green. We're talking brown here. Going to carry on through with Marcus again. Oh yes, he did send a movement shot. We get to enjoy the movement. I say hit a lot when I drink. Don't know why. That's not the right word, right? Moser is 100% independent for sure, and that's one thing that makes them so unique. Brick Lane. You know what I'd actually love? Imagine me getting a Streamliner in to review. I mean, Eduard, I actually have him on Instagram. We've chatted in the past. He's so easy to reach, and we did chat about it at one stage. I think James, founder of Timeless Capital, we were talking about it at one stage. Getting a Streamliner in to review would be so much fun because it's so out there and unique. Carl's saying he loved the car watch video. It's definitely not for everyone. The problem is when you're so focused on being a watch channel, when you try something different, it doesn't exactly appeal to everyone, but and Am I wanting a hit of something? No, Megan, I was talking about the whiskey, but yeah, I said hit in a bit of a different context, but it looks cool on rubber, as mentioned by Brummy. And you can buy replacement bracelets for these too, which also just add to the effect. It's nice. Moser Pioneer is a very unique piece and really put the brand back on the map again. Dress and sports. Actually, look on my channel. Go onto Google or onto YouTube and type in N something, reviewing N something's collection, N something without any breaks. And you'll see a couple of Mosers, an Endeavor and a Pioneer. And we talk about just how Moser manages to take the classicism, but also make it into something that looks very organic, sporty at the same time with loom, and very nice approach. I like that it's so unique to the brand, what they've done. My favorite, of course, are the blackout models that they do with just nothing but hands on the dial. Looks terrific. Even the case stylings, all unique. Thank you for these, Marcus. Jumping to Martin next with a 14270 from 97, Swiss-only dial. Now, someone who's more of an aficionado when it comes to dial variations can tell me about what the Swiss-only really represents. Well, they're very rare, but 36 mil, I think, is sublime for this model. I think the Explorer and 36 needs to be under the radar, low-key. And there's a few more comments. Megan saying Streamliner is a watch release of 2020. Okay, great. I did actually do a video on the Streamliner. Also didn't get any attention whatsoever because it's not a watch that's spoken about at all, but that's just the way it is. That's how life goes. And let's keep going. So 73 Math says Thomas Burnett definitely look into Instagram. I tell you, Thomas, I've been trying to get you onto the Instagram train. There is such inspiring stuff on there, and I've had such a good time just learning about. Not only you can really get a good understanding of the brands themselves, you can dig deeper into what they do by looking at their Instagram accounts, how they approach their designs. They share a lot of behind-the-scene footage of their pieces, and just the community in general. There's some amazing people. The joke is, I probably follow so many of you on Instagram, and I don't even know it, or you follow me, and I don't know it. It's a big world. Yeah, 14270 Explorer 36 mil, gorgeous. One element that I find that I don't like too much, that I much prefer on the 1016s, are those numerals. I find these numerals look a lot more classic, but they still look a little bit out there, not as plain and simple as they could be, if you know what I mean. And I remember Moser guys I think the CEO did actually watch the Moser video, Megan. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, even though it wasn't seen by many. And Flippin', thank you so much. And sister, that's great. Love to all my brothers here and sister. Yeah, Megan is a part of the crew now, and it's so great. It's so nice. And I actually I have a submission from a Stephanie, and she said she would do a backflip if it was featured on the show. Sadly, it's going to be at the very end of the show, but it's the way it is. Okay, next we have Matthew sending in a Steinhardt. Matthew from New Zealand, who's probably still in the chat. Steinhardt with a Volvo. And I think there was talk about, do cars equate to the watches you wear? This is a good example of that discussion, and talking about the watches and car video that came out this week. I think he wanted to try and tie it in. So this is quite a good pairing. I mean, again, there's so many more brands that I didn't touch, like Maserati and Volvo and other names from all sorts of other families that, it was a 15-minute video as it was. So cool seeing this pairing. These watches, again, I've mentioned Steinhardt in the past. They are bulletproof, and you can really do anything to them and they will last eternity, which is incredible. So let's see what else is going on in the chat. Talking about attention. If you wanted attention for your yeah, Mason, if you wanted attention for your Streamliner vid, include Rolex in the title. Like Moses Streamliner, is it as good as a Rolex? Yeah, I know. It's so difficult. I try my best to ride the line of clickbait, but not clickbait. You want it to be something that appeals to more people, but at the same time, I really try not to dupe the audience. It's difficult to do. It's it's a struggle. I can tell you one thing. I spend a full 5 hours before the video gets uploaded just prepping types of titles that could be used. There's so much stuff that goes on behind the scenes. It's ludicrous. I tell you what. Anyway, Matthew, thank you for sending in this Steinhardt. This looks to be a 39 mil, maybe, the new latest re-edition 39 mil with your Volvo. It's great. It's nice to see that not everyone here is a CEO, multimillionaire. We're going to carry on through to Michael. Oof. Oh, this is beautiful. Tudor Heritage chronograph, technically the Monte Carlo reimagined. I just love the combination of parts on this piece. The strap looks fantastic. The orange highlights. Oh, the cream dial. Smith's clickbait, Eric Bell. Don't worry, it's going to be very subdued. I'm going to say something like tribute to the Mark 11. I'm going to keep it simple. The irony is, I actually learned this over time, is that when you're talking about watches nowadays, clickbait was everything 3 years ago. The Count of Monte Cristo, truth is. So clickbait was everything 3 years ago, but people are starting to see, because the thing is, we're pretty smart. Doing this, buying these things, affording these things, we aren't just, everyday people. Most of the time, we tend to be people who have a bit of a higher level of intelligence, I'd like to believe, because we do think of these pieces in depth. So people see through clickbait a lot of the time. And just being able to be on the nose with what the title is. So just saying review, Smith's Navigator, tribute to Mark 11, that will get a lot of attention, as opposed to the greatest watch you've never seen in the world ever. I tell you, clickbait. It's very hard to ride the line and try and stay on course. Joe Rogan Rolex review. Same thing. Same kind of idea. You want to get the clickbait, you just type in all the popular trends and it'll happen. Jumping back to the Monte Carlo, that I like to call it, everything from the orange highlights, the cream dial, the late 60s, 70s subdials, it looks so good. The date window at the 6 o'clock, fantastic. All of it's great. It's a really fun piece. In the past, we've actually looked at original Monte Carlos before. It's amazing the variety we've seen over the last few months. It's almost as if, why only 45 minutes on the subdial, BDev asks. I can probably address that. That's just how the chronograph's been arranged, I think. Some of these are set in such a way that, is it even necessary? I think it's trying to be true to form, to the originals. Whether it's 60 or 45 minutes, I don't know if it's actually that relevant. Maybe that's to do with the movement. Maybe someone can fill that in. So, yeah, gorgeous looking watch. The navy blue as well just completes it. Awesome shot from Michael. Gnarly crown and pushes, yeah, for sure. What would you call these? Knurled. A very heavy duty. And actually, speaking of which, I've mentioned this before in the past, I think. I don't know how they line up with the piece overall. They look a bit too heavy duty for what the watch is, in my taste. And just imagine that digging. It's like sandpaper digging into the wrist, It looks a little bit much for what it's trying to be. These actually, when you consider the timeline of this watch, when it was made in the 60s and 70s, it wouldn't exactly correspond with the kind of finish that you see on these crown pushes. So that's one gripe, I guess, we could take away from it. But overall, I mean, it's such another fun watch, like the Zodiac that we saw earlier, the Watermelon, mentioning as engine turd, black-eyed panda. Yeah, I'm going to carry on through. Mike sends in a gorgeous watch. Oof, now we get to some cool stuff. So we know Mike as Hoplite. I think he should be in the chat somewhere. Shaitan saying that's why I wear my watches above the bone. Crowns never bother me. Yeah, or wear them on your right wrist and you'll never have to worry about them again. That's the way. Seeing what else is going on in the chat. I'm saying, get your name right. Nefarion says 2020 Submariner complete redesign as title. You know what? I did a whole prediction series. There was this, I can't even remember. Watches and Giggles did a video once about a supply leak, and I made a video and that got 100,000 views, which is ridiculous. I find it scummy actually when you have to title your stuff that way. So I hope in future people are more savvy with the clickbait. Megan, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Megan. Need to catch up with you. I need to get your number so we can actually chat. Instead of chatting on your dad's phone, we can actually catch up properly. That'd be nice. But thank you so much for the super chat, Megan. It's always a pleasure. It's so nice having you here too, actually being able to chat with all of us. I mean, Megan, honestly, Megan has the biggest wealth of knowledge when it comes to vintage pieces in this setting where we are now. She's been collecting watches all her life, everything from Dirty Dozen, and now she only buys one owner Rolex and any other vintage piece you can find in Paris. So amazing woman, I'll tell you that much, gents. Okay, going to carry on through and see what else is going on in the chats. Right, let's get into this gorgeous JLC Reverso. So it's called a Grand Ultra Thin in rose gold, And that's all you need. I mean, look at it. It really does epitomize. Look at that. I love this. So he's rocking a stogie and he's watching, this must have been the 50s video that we did the other day. And it's just, what a beautiful piece. Talking about reversos. JLC reverso is one thing, but then getting a grand ultra thin is another. That's another level. Getting it in gold really solidifies it. Talking about a Grail watch, this is an example of a Grail watch right here. And I just love the fact that this 30s design has just withstood the test of time. I linked up JLC with BMW. I don't know how effective it is. Some were saying IWC would have been a better choice, but it's a beautiful machine. And I don't think it's a duoface. The thin probably just means I don't think it has a movement. Again, I do say anyone who is sending in JLCs, if they do have clear backs or if they do have movements or anything on display, send in the reverse shot as well. I think it's very important. And Flippin saying reverso and a cigar, this guy I want to be friends with. Yeah, so Mike, he's known as Hoplite in the chat normally when he's here. That's just fantastic. What a beautiful piece. Has blued hands. I mean, it has everything you would want from a basic. I mean, look at the serifs on those numerals. It's like it's pornography for the wrist, really. When we talk about just what this watch has managed to do over time, 30s inspired design that's still as relevant today. Clean, simple, clear, streamlined, basic. I would love a JLC, actually. I really would. This is the kind of example. And did I say rose gold? Is it even rose gold? Lighting is so difficult to judge. Anyway, we've looked at this long enough. Mike, thank you for sending this in. And we have, from Mr. Perpetual, a Tudor Black Bay, steel and gold. And we never seen this combination on the wrist. So it's great seeing this lined up. Shaitan's saying JLC is more Jag to you. Jag. Yeah, sure is. I mean, it does also. You're right. Jag is actually a very good line to link up for sure. Classic reverso styling. Oh, geez, I could talk about it for days. I think it's amazing. It's a beautiful thing. If you send in a Lunga, always include shots of the back because it's law. It really is. If you send in anything of high horology, please send in the case backs because that is just, it's 2/3 of the fun. We want to see the movements of these things. And we're going to be looking at an awesome Stover in a second. So the two-tone, the gold dial is quite something. Very chic, champagne, kind of reminds you of, what would we say, 80s and 90s styling. Pretty amazing. Never seen this combination on the wrist before. I think the strap also comes standard with this model in particular. It's got the gold crown. I don't have to use, what do they call it? There's always a different feature. What do they call this? I know Omega uses, I'm drawing a blank here. We're hitting the 3-hour mark at this point, and of course I'm tripping over my words. Whatever process they use, it's a much more affordable way of almost plating the components, but in saying that, it's very good value for money. 30 dial, that's at 73 MAF for sure. This looks just like a 30 dial. All you would need are a few diamonds here and there, and you've got the finish. Great. Mr. Perpetual, thank you. So over the next half an hour, I don't know how long we're going to, this might be longer than, as I said, it's going to be a long show. Jumping to Norman next. Oops. Norman sends in a Stover, which we've featured one Stover on the show already. And yeah, like I was saying, it's going to be a longer than a 3-hour show because there were so many submissions that I had to save and keep rolling with. So this piece has everything from blued hands, and it reminds me of marine chronometers. We've seen quite a few of these before, and you just notice with the Romans around the dial, the sub-seconds, it's so nice and clean. The blued hands, it's gorgeous. Really is nice. You got this onion-inspired crown, which is nice as well. And then he also sent in a movement shot because you kind of have to. Looks great. I mean, these watches are by no means high horology, but they do like to express what they're doing. I feel like this movement is all, I don't know if it's in-house made or if it's modified or what, but overall, what a great shot. 17 joules, nice big balance, very clean. Main barrels, blued screws. We can see all the rubies on display. And if we get back to the front again, you could almost say this is an enamel dial. I wouldn't be surprised if this was an enamel dial because it's just so nice and clean. Can honestly say I've never seen a Stover that looks like this before. When you think Stover, you think pilot watches. So, and Nick's saying it's an ETA. Thank you for that, Nick. Cool looking piece. Does look like an enamel dial for sure. Needs a power reserve to be a marine chronometer homage. Thanks for that, Russell. And Russell knows his marine chronometers. I mean, he's collected quite a few in his time. Next to Norman, he also sent in, would you believe, another Tag Heuer. This is made, I mean, we've had so many Seikos and Tag Heuers together. Lots of Zins as well today. So this is a Tag Heuer Monaco. I think he said that this was one of his first watches that he got. I can't remember. The way you can tell this is a Tag Heuer Monaco and not a Heuer Monaco is because the crown is the right way around, where the Heuers generally have the crowns on the other side because of the quirky caliber 11 movement. Nicely spaced. I must say, the way the dials have been arranged here, we get to see, actually look at the video. I made a video like, what, 8 months ago when I didn't know how to record anything. What did I say? I linked it to Steve McQueen and called it something like Cool or, I don't know. It worked out really well because it had a tie-in with Steve McQueen, King of Cool. So it had a good title to it. But it's such an unconventional watch. Many people love just because it's so peculiar, like other pieces we've seen in the past. So is this a caliber 12, as Mason said? I think so too. You're right. It should normally say it on the dial, though. I'm surprised. This might be an older variant. Don't know. Nice piece, though. Sits pretty well on the wrist. It's a bit of a brick. Definitely a watch of its time, and I think that's what makes it so funny. And in the video that I made about Tag Heuer and the Monaco, I said it was something that they were rushing to compete with Zenith and the El Primero. I mean, it was a race. It was a race to see who did it first. And I think because of that, Tag or Heuer kind of skimped on the details and just boxed it and sold it. You know, they didn't think so much about aesthetics back in the day. I don't know. It's a peculiar piece. Next, though, thank you for this, Norman, for the two pieces. We're jumping to Pat with a gorgeous Oris. Now, I am someone who has said before on record that the Oris Aquis is a watch that I don't feel to be very inspired. I think the design styling is very there. You know, it's there. It does a job. But the color scheme on this thing, and actually, I didn't Bruce Williams get one of these and it was a fake, if I remember right, this exact model, don't know. But the way they've done the colors on this, when we look at the ceramic bezel, green for the money, yeah, for sure. We have an olive drab style bezel, which is a nice touch. And he's managed to take such a good photo, we get to see how the dial works together. But then if we talk about the styling, he also sent an offset shot. I mean, that's great. The styling of the piece, though, the batons and everything else, I just think, and the case and everything, I mean, they've made, we've spoken about the 65s and just how well done they have been over the years. But this piece, to me, just, it feels so generic. It's bad to say, but the aesthetics and the layout on the dial, it could be so much, or they could do something as simple as, I think I mentioned this in the last show, using the O of Oris as a 12 o'clock marker, something that just lets it stand out a bit more. But again, as an everyday wearing watch, I say it's okay, but I mean, it really does everything you'd want it to do, does the business, looks great, simple, clean, love the colors, really does complete it well. And I'm just chatting away while everyone else is having a good go. Oris looks great in the green, unless you're Bruce Williams to get the one that's fake. Yeah, pretty hilarious. I mean, that was a good story. Roberto, absolute pleasure. Again, if you'd like to reach out to me, tag me in the chat at @idguy, hashtag, whatever, and I can see your comments a lot easier. Roberto, it's always a pleasure. Love these shows. We've been rolling now for almost 3 hours, and Lord knows how I do it, honestly. I don't understand. So how you guys are still with me, guys and girls, thank you all. And we're going to carry on through. Next to Paul. Now, Paul was in the chat. I'm sure he's gone to sleep by now already, but he is known as Running Man, and he has sent in an amazing little selection of pieces that he has. This is a 1943 Fleet Air Arm Omega, reference CK2179. And watches of that time, I mean, it's incredible. The history of these pieces being sent out to air forces and military forces, there's just so much depth to it. And you can find all the history online, which is incredible. Bud's saying it's harder to leave than to stay. Wow, that's flattering. That's flattering. Drink, a lot of it helps. Hans, I think that's it, you know. I've found my perfect Red Bull, whiskey and super strong caffeinated coffee, And that does it for me. You know, you get the high, but then you also are hammered enough to be able to present on the fly. So that's the way it works. Speaking of which, I'm going to hit the coffee. Gorgeous looking piece. I would imagine since it's from 1943, it uses radium on its dial. Look at the condition of this piece. Maybe it has been cleaned up in the past. I don't know. But look at that seconds hand and the hour hand being curved around. It's great. Classic logo. I love this old symbol. It's just gorgeous. Simple, basic. What I find amazing, I'm actually working on a write-up about a piece just like this, the Air Ministry model from Smiths. Have to mention Smiths again every 20 minutes. And saying that at a time when the world was going through such a freaking, you know, when it had hit the fan quite literally everywhere, they were still making such beautiful things as functional tools, functional utilities. And I love that. It's that romance of the time that I think, you know, we look back at it. If you were living at the time, there's no romance at all. It was a freaking nightmare. But the fact that they were able to create these romantic things back then is amazing. Anyway, I'm going to carry on through. Paul sends a few more pieces. Datejust 41 that he's been wearing, that he loves. He didn't give me much of a description of the piece. There he is. He's in the chat. Awesome to have you here. Having a look at your watches finally. How does he keep the coffee hot? It came from, Somlo, London. Pretty sure the dial had some work. Somlo in London is a great Omega store. It's one of the first vintage stores I visited when I was there. And I met everyone in the shop. It's a family-run business, and they have some amazing stuff. I sat down and tried on every variant of Speedmasters, MOD Seamasters. It was a great time. So if you're in London, look up Solmo. I think you spell it S-O. I actually follow them on Instagram. It's S-O-L-M-O. If you're in London, check out Solmo. They're in Burlington Arcade. Great store, great service. The watches are very decently priced for what they are. They have some great models to look at. So again, great photo as well, as someone's mentioned already. Reed saying, Running Man, you've got a really nice set of pieces. And as a Datejust, as far as Datejusts go, in the very beginning of the show, we were looking at a Sky Dweller, blue dial, just like this. But Datejusts, funnily enough, I'm actually working on a video right now about the Datejust. I'm asking a question that a viewer asked, is the watch becoming obsolete? Looking at everything in its entirety, that the Datejust is losing its footing. And there's a yes and a no for that answer. But this piece, what I love, when it comes to looking at a Datejust, the idea of having batons instead of numerals, instead of Romans and everything else, the batons manage to push your attention to the Cyclops and the complication. And that's really what makes this piece stand out. I think as far as Datejusts go, the focal point should be the date. Everything else, I think the Cyclops can be hacked off, but otherwise, yeah, that's it. So we're jumping next, another piece from Paul. He sent in a great set. This is a rubber B on another Mark II Explorer. What a great shot. What a high-res shot. Fantastic. Oh, you guys send in some awesome things. It's always a pleasure sharing these because we just get to enjoy it, you know. Sit back and enjoy the 3-hour plus narrative we go through. So another Mark II. What I like about the shot the most is that because it's offset, we get to enjoy the three-dimensionality of the batons, how everything stands up proud. We get to see the added depth to the dial on a rubber B, casual, everyday wearing, superb. And everyone's in the chat. It's great. What I like is that the chat has now stopped in the conversation side, and now you're listening to me. It's so funny. I love how the chat varies over time. So Paul, thank you for this. Next, he also sent in, oof, what a great collection. I'd actually like to do a collection review of yours one day. Now, he did correct himself. He called it a snowflake, but it's a skyflake. And if you hadn't corrected yourself, I would have called it a snowflake because, I mean, this is, if I'm not wrong, this is only supposedly for the American market, no? Wasn't this how they were released? What a beautiful looking dial. I mean, this powder blue. They also have a version in pink, and they kind of represent the sky. But you know how to take your photos, Running Man or Paul, however you want to be addressed. This guy has everything I want. It's nice. I mean, really lovely, very tasteful as well. He does focus on the sports watches, but he has the two pieces that I like the most, this, and he has a very particular Zenith that's just arrived on the market that we'll be looking at now. Gorgeous watch, spring drive, you know, the whole idea of what Grand Seiko does with this is almost like a parchment finish on the dial. It's so nice and clean. And because the photo is so high res, we get to enjoy it. Yeah, Awesome. It's not a part of the season's collection. Thank you, BS. Here I was thinking that it was. So this is actually all around the world. You can get these pieces. That's good to know. The strap is also fantastic. It's just great. Thank you for sending this, Paul. I've got to keep rolling because we're now past the 3-hour mark. Before I know it, we'll be hitting the 4-hour mark, and then it just gets ridiculous. then people are going to get angry with me in the comments. As it is, there's a very small portion of people who actually watch these live shows to the end, but everyone who does, you are more amazing than most in the world, I can honestly say. How can anyone sit and listen to a show for 4 hours straight, or 3 hours, whatever? It's kind of like a podcast, so I guess it works, but it's not. Another Hulk, as mentioned by Miles. And this is an example of a shot where we get to see the parts in a very well-presented form, where the bezel, to me, doesn't look as peculiar. The ceramic bezel on the green models really stand out to me a bit too much, but this dial looks almost, you can even see the texture on the dial. What an amazing shot. Again, Paul, you've outdone yourself with these. It's incredible. And Paul is actually on YouTube. If you look at Running Man's channel, he's a streamer. So he streams, I think he streams first-person shooters, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, it's gorgeous. What a great shot. And we still got more, don't worry. He's also sent in a Pepsi on a Jubilee, because why not? And this, to me, I might be wrong, but this looks like a first generation because of the pink and purple we see on the bezel. I actually had some hands-on time with this once, and I found the bezel to be so distracting, There's some awesome shots. And Russell, speaking of which, I'm going to link your YouTube channel in the description of this video as we get to your watch in a second, actually, because he has shared a lot of his pieces on YouTube. And yeah, going to carry on through here. What a beautiful arrangement of parts. It's nice to see this in detail. And there's another shot he sent in, Pepsi on a Jubilee. I really believe it's so overhyped for what it is, really. It's difficult to say. When we're looking at the hype factor of these watches and where they've gone now, personally, I think the Pepsi has been a little bit over marketed. I've seen some ridiculous stuff on Instagram. The Hulk Submariners. I saw one store with about 50 of them on the table, and it kind of begs the question. There's been talk about how these gray market dealers are buying straight out of ADs. And it sounds so true when you get that kind of stock. It's pretty scaly. Anyway, Paul, thank you for these. And finally, this is the one that really caught my attention, and one that, he has the A3818 Revival Zenith El Primero. And believe it or not, we're going to be looking at an A384 very soon, which is hilarious. And this was done in partnership with Revolution magazine. No, maybe, I think. What a stunning piece. I remember the only time I've actually seen this was the graphics when they were shared. I haven't seen any shots of it in the flesh. One thing that I love is the way that you have the Golden Gate Bridge styled minute track that runs around. But look at that dial. Ice blue on the bracelet. It's even got the ladder bracelet. It's so fun. It's such an awesome piece. What a great contrast. And all the little details, like where the subdials have been arranged with the black and white contrast there. And yeah, it's stunning. It really is. And it's Rake Revolution, my favorite watch by far. Wore it today. Yeah, it's gorgeous, Paul. It really is. And you obviously play bowls, but we get to see it in even more detail here. What a gem. It's just so peculiar. It just looks like a watch of 1968, 1969. It sits right there. It's a lovely thing. Very interesting piece, as Russell says. We haven't seen many of these because they are in limited run. Let me get a bit closer to it. Oh, it has a pulsation dial. How fantastic is that? So it's actually a lot more practical than a tachymeter. It's a smartwatch, it's a smartwatch, essentially. Can keep track of your heart rate. But it's just everything about this watch that I adore. The case, especially, the size. It's 37 mils, but probably wears larger than that for sure. The way the case has been arranged, these square ends, it's so 70s in the way it's arranged. Late 60s, 70s, you know what I mean? Fun. A lot of fun, interesting, strange, peculiar. Blue heaven, as Wristwatch Experience says. Partnered with Revolution magazine. Thank you for that, Thomas. Bud the Stud says, I'm sick of waiting on the steel Pepsi. Love my Meteorite Pepsi, but the steel has been too difficult, and I may turn it down at this point. if I was in your position, I'd be enjoying the gold. The gold Pepsi, I think, is a much better, just as a watch for collectability value and the factors behind it. I think the gold variant is just so much more fun. The blue dial, if you can find a blue dial Pepsi gold, oof, gorgeous. I think the steel demand is just pathetic, frankly. It's quite sad how it's gone over the last 2 years, 3 years. Paul, thank you for sending these in. Amazing collection of watches. Please reach out again on email. We can catch up. I'd love to hear more about the watches that you've collected over time. How did you get into the hobby? It's always fascinating. I mean, since you're a fellow YouTuber, we can actually have a good chat. Anyway, next from Pope Benedict the 16th. I kid you not. This is how he titled his username, which is great. I mean, I love the quirky emails. A Grand Seiko. Didn't give me the reference numbers, so I'm not even going to try and guess it, but I am useless with Seiko references. But we have a champagne dial, a watch that very much epitomizes the brand. I feel like this could be a quartz model, actually. 9F quartz, running a Zulu-style strap, no, NATO strap. Well, it does look Zulu-ish. Zulu pieces, or keepers, I should say. Gorgeous looking watch, though. Really does epitomize the brand. And there's one model in particular that I wanted to talk about in the future, running through the 9F movement and the way the cases are designed and styled. There's all sorts to it. And he also sent another shot of it on the bracelet. The resolution's not the best, but you get a good idea. It's just amazing how many Seikos and Grand Seikos and all the rest we've seen. You won't believe what's coming up next, but we get another Hulk. You won't believe this. Okay, thank you for this, Pope Benedict. Great seeing it. You're doing very well in the Vatican. It's great having you here. Next from Randy, we get another Hulk Submariner. Okay, but wait for it. We get another El Primero. So we just had Paul sharing his Hulk and his El Primero. Now we get Randy with his Hulk. And I give up. I throw my hands up in the air. I think this is the 5th Hulk we've had on the show. It's phenomenal. I just can't get over it. It's a really nice shot as well. We get to see the bezel and the dial and all the light. This is in a car somewhere. And this El Primero, the A384, Randy, we know is 73 MAF, 73 MAF. I'm pretty sure that's you. And I do follow you on Instagram. So you've been sharing this watch all the time, which is great. I think between the two, and we can actually just do this right now. We can pull up both of these models and have a good look at them. How often do we get to see both the reissues from the same family in one show? So this watch, I think, is the more fun factor. This is the watch you wear on a weekend, where I think the standard A384 with a Panda dial is something that you could just wear every day. It's for my tastes, I'm definitely not someone who enjoys watches that are very polarizing. I find the Panda dial, a watch like this, much more wearable as an everyday piece because it's just simple, elegant. You can use it for all sorts of reasons, and it doesn't scream too loudly compared to the the A3818. This is very brash next to just the standard Panda. It's great though. I mean, it's amazing how we can do this. And believe it or not, I think Zenith has just released a revival of their A386. Have a look at that. I'm pretty sure they've just brought out a new edition, the next variant up from the A384s. And Randy also sent in a movement shot, because how can you not appreciate a Zenith with movement? You're okay for not sending yours in, Paul, because you had a bracelet on, but it's gorgeous. Automatic column wheel chronograph, one of the first ever made. Really important. I mean, it's quite a milestone to make such a thin movement, but also one that has all of the workings, being automatic too. And it looks like the chat is quietening down, which is awesome. I can see Megan is still here. I can't believe you guys are still here. You guys are amazing. You are incredible people. Very special, I can say that much, because honestly, I wouldn't mind just doing a show presenting to 5 people or just talking to myself, because I can at this point. It's so good. So thank you, Randy, for sending these in. And Paul, both of you guys have similar tastes. Okay, got a few more. We're at Raymond, and we're going to be, oh my goodness. Sadly, Raymond, we can't see this watch in great detail, but we did speak about it. It's a JLC club that you received for your bar mitzvah many years back. Sadly, the resolution it's just one giant pixel, so it's a bit of a problem. So apologies, you can't really use that very well, but we've got more. Raymond also sent in a Seiko 5 that has a SKX conversion. Sorry about the mouse. And if I'm not wrong, Raymond is also South African. I think he is. And I think he mentioned in his mail to me something like, it's nice having a South African presenting on watches for a change. So it's great. I mean, it's just how it happens. So BDev says, it's hard to watch this podcast and the Indy race at the same time. Oh, really? IndyCar is going on at the moment. That's cool. Indianapolis, you might need to explain a bit more detail. And Miles asked, saying that you should do a live show picking your favorites, your top 50. You won't believe, but I've actually saved at least 7 or 8 episodes worth. I've saved a huge selection. And I'm thinking maybe at the end of this year, doing a top of the wrist shots. That would be so good, you know? So good. Definitely want to do that. That'll be such a lot of fun. Just a year in review, you know, the best wrist shots, the best watches, and we just have a well-balanced. That's a lot of work for me. Holy smokes. So Raymond also sends in a Tudor P01 that he just picked up. And it's pretty incredible. People are still very divided on it. I made a video discussing it being a prototype that is actually important, speaking around how this piece is able to share the fact that it is an in-between model. It's not something that has reached the final goal yet. It still very much is a watch transitioning. It's a prototype in the purest sense. And he also put it on a bracelet. I have no idea. This looks like a Breitling bracelet that he's fitted it to. But you can have all sorts of fun with this. Go onto Google and look up P01 Tudor bracelet. And you can see that if you find a black bay, you can actually fit the bracelet onto these models with a bit of jiggery pokery. You get a good idea of what the watch looks like on the wrist, though, at a side view. It's so peculiar seeing this, because this looks like something that's literally been punched out of a machine. And of course, that's what they were trying to do here. Wanted to try and bring across the idea that it's a work in progress. That never actually made it. Underachieving watch collector. I cut my own hair today. I mean, that statement alone is already bad enough. And wouldn't you believe? Hold on a second. I don't know if we have 2 Raymonds or not. This is the same Raymond that I think just sent in the P01, but we have one of my favorite pieces coming up in a second, and I don't know if it is the same Raymond that is shared here. We have 2 of them. The next watch coming up is one of my all-time favorites in the reissue dive watch category, and we're going to see it right now. Here we go. Are you ready, ladies and gentlemen? The Black Bay, 50 fathoms, Barracuda. Have we ever seen one of these in the flesh featured on the show? Absolutely not. They are pretty rare, and I have a feeling, and it's even on a tropic strap. I mean, how cool is that, eh? It's just so classic. What a gorgeous thing. So I learned a few things about this watch over the course of preparing the reissue dive watch video. Thomas Burnett, what? So this really caught my attention. So Raymond did mention that he's wondering if he should sell this piece for something else. And I just said, no, don't. You can't. Lots of people actually mentioned, do not get rid of this piece, because it is a collector's item at this point. But there's a few things about it. It doesn't have a hacking seconds, which is unbelievable. You'd think a watch of this price would have hacking seconds. Look how clean this thing is. I mean, it's so jarring, actually, because you're looking at a watch that was made in and around the 50s, early 60s. And you look at the dial and the patina. This is such a good use of color, actually, because we get to see it looks so legitimate, actually. The white hands and everything else nice and clean, but then you see there's no degradation on the dial at all, and it kind of makes you think a little bit. We've seen old school pieces already that have had their hands that are a bit fouled up. This watch just looks so clean and perfect, and you think to yourself, how is it possible? And then you go, well, it's a reissue. But everything about it, I think, is just fun. I mentioned this about the red. You get to see just how the red plays in the light, very bright, and it gets darker to a burgundy. A great combination of parts. We've never seen a Barracuda on the show before, and very seldom do we see it at all. I think the only time I've ever seen this piece was on Watchbox. I think Tim Mosso did a discussion around this. Black Bear 50 fathoms. Did I say that, Shaitan? I think I probably would have said that at this point in time. We watch guys saying, been listening for the last hour or so. Great to tune in. I'll send you a pic of my summer watch. Bit of a rare bird for the next show. I'll be fantastic, really. Maybe we can do another one of these next weekend. I don't know. depending on how I feel, if I haven't overworked myself to death. So Raymond, the two Raymonds, I don't know if it's the same Raymond or if there are two Raymonds, but thank you all for sending these in. They're fantastic. And we're going to move now next to Ricardo. I don't know if you're in the chat. I think I saw you earlier. Ricardo sending in a Black Bay 58. I think this is probably the first Black Bay 58 we've seen in this configuration. Leather strap, matte dial. You really managed to see just how the light works on the matte surfaces here. And it's pretty gorgeous. It's a very nice combination, gilt hands. Dear Artifact actually mentioned, everybody loves Raymond for sure, but Dear Artifact mentioned a good point. The reason why these watches have become so popular and sought after, I mean, they're literally on par with Rolex models. I'm going to hit the coffee before I say the next line. Is because this family managed to address everything that people wanted, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. They kind of nailed it. Apart from the snowflake hand. I really detest the snowflake hand, but let's not talk about that here. Overall, great looking piece, great size, fits well. And on leather strap, it really does tone it down. And another thing, look how the leather matches the gilt dial. How clean is that? The leather of the strap and the Tudor branding, nice and clean. It's great. Black Bay 58, you can never go wrong. Oh, wow. Okay, we've got a few more coming up. We've got Russell and we have Zane still to come. Don't worry, you'll enjoy them. We have an SMP 36 from Riley, and really nice piece. I mean, for someone who has a small wrist, actually for any wrist, this watch does look pretty great. I made a discussion, maybe 6 or 7 months ago, talking about how Omega should possibly readdress shrinking down the size of the new Professional down to 38.5 mils, say, perfect in-between size. For just a standard wrist, I think what this does so well is that you get such a great complement between the bracelet and the case and dial. And that's really my argument. Any watch that's 36 mils, you get to appreciate just how the parts come together so much neater. Here we see that the proportions just look bang on, as opposed to just a huge face and a skinny bracelet or whatever else. It would be nice to see a 38.5 mil model. Again, if I can reach out to Omega's CEO, it'd be nice to chat to him. We can have a good discussion around that too, but that's it. Okay, we're going to move on now to Russell. Russell sent in 2 sets of watches over the course of 2 weeks. What should I do? I'm going to save the Pateks for the end of the show. So I'm going to save Russell's last Patek for the end of the show. And yeah, it's a marathon for sure. We're definitely going to be going on longer than 3.5 at this point. So going to carry on. So the first watch from Russell is a Ulysses Nardon Freak. Okay, this watch is, as we know, Freak, purest sense. And it has quite an interesting complication. The way that everything is set on the hand itself. Now we're getting to the heavy hitters, ladies and gentlemen. Freaky. So basically, the entire movement is practically assembled on the hand. There's just a few. I think the main barrel is all that's not set on the main hand itself, or the 2 hands, should I say. So we have your hours here on the left, and we have your minutes here on the right. It's just such a peculiar beast. And he sent a few shots. We managed to get some really good understanding of how the dial works. This is actually a fantastic photo because you get to see how the gear is placed inside the rehort almost. Look at that gearing around the inside here. That's what allows the hands to basically move around the dial. Ulysses Nardon. My, they make amazing and peculiar things. I mean, this looks like a Christmas tree, you know? Freak of the week for sure. It's a very wild carousel. I'm sure Russell can mention more details about the watch if you like, some more specs about the piece. Because again, 3.5 hours into the show, you can imagine I am all over the shop. And I titled this Freak and Coffee. There's a good example. We have 11:45, and it's such a peculiar beast for sure. I mean, the way everything's placed and set, good name for it. Calling it a freak. Get your freak on. It's interesting but ugly as 73 math. It definitely isn't a watch for everyone, for sure. I can understand that. The one thing you do for these pieces is appreciate it for what they've managed to attack here with the horology, how they've been able to build the movement onto the hands themselves and allow them to just work their way around the dial. And also nice shot of the dial itself, petroleum blue almost. And look how they've actually heat blued this separate gear. That really adds an extra dynamic to the dial as well. It's just nuts all the way through. How thick is it? I think many would like to know, if you'd like to tell us, Russell. And yeah, in its entirety, it's a bonkers watch for sure. But I need to carry on before the end of the show because we're going to be sitting on these for ages. Thank you for this, Russell. Your Patek will be coming up at the end. Ryan sends in another Seiko. We have a Prospex Turtle. I feel like I always botch this reference number, so I'm not even going to try. But I've never seen it in all gold before. Maybe it's plated. I don't know. Is it just finished in that color? No idea. Someone can maybe correct me there. But he also sent a shot of the SKX. Can you believe how many Seikos we've actually featured on the show over the course of this period? Thank you, Knife Watch. That's him. So Ryan in the chat, SRPC44. Thank you for that. Gold bonded. Never seen this in full gold before. Looks quite nice, actually. I mean, it's a callback to the original Turtles, and it does definitely do that. It kind of has that status around it, you know? It's a watch that represents the real golden era of when Seiko created its dive watches, and this is a good example of it. And a good old SKX, I mean, we've spoken about this so much in the past, and like to talk about it in the future. I think maybe do a bit more of a discussion around it. I've got to carry on through. There's only 5 more, 5 more pieces to go. Stephanie sends in Rolex Cellini. She was asking me in the email about when we think this watch was made. And she wanted to know if this watch is featured, she'll do backflips. So Stephanie, if you have managed to catch up with the show, or if you do watch it in the future, thank you for sending this in. We came to the conclusion that it feels like a watch from the 70s, because that's really when the TV style case came into being. But with that peculiar ribbing that runs around the sides of the case itself, it's very hard to place. She's never seen this watch before. She's tried her best to look up records of this watch. Anyway, so if I'm not wrong, it's a 14 karat gold. It's hand wound. On a woman's wrist, it looks fantastic. I mean, it really is TV style in the purest sense. Beautiful blue dial as well. I mean, it's amazing. Getting women into the hobby. Again, Stephanie, a faithful viewer. I did say to her that my female viewing audience is probably about 0.2% of the total viewing audience. So it really means a lot that I do have a few ladies watching the show. And Stephanie, here's your piece. Many are saying very nice layout, Geneve, 73 to 75, some are saying. And yeah, many are liking it as well. It's great. But this starts saying, well, my wife is starting to give me the "you love your watches more than me" look. So, oh, you're saying your wife. I thought you were talking about my future wife. Thanks, bud. So your wife is starting to give you the look of your love for watches more than me. So I'm going to take off. It's a pleasure having you, bud, as always. And it's funny. You know, you guys are addicts to the show, and it's amazing. Many have said that this show is a monster that needs to be fed. And talking about this piece. So there was mention, I think she did say it was a 14 karat gold model. Stunning. Really nice and unique. I've never seen a bezel like this before. What would you call it? It's almost like rolling. I don't know. A rolled bezel. Who knows? Going to carry on through to Torben. And if you want to follow him on Instagram, here's his handle. This is actually great. Actually tagging a photo is cool. Is it Tobin or Torben? Oh dear. Tobin Stevenson. And he sends in another Polar Explorer 2. I think we have featured 3 of these on the show today. It's pretty incredible. Bud, thank you so much for being a part of the show, as always. It's such a pleasure. Braided. Thank you, BDev. That's a much better word. Braided dial. I think Megan gave up. Megan gave up on the show. She's gone. Stunning looking piece. I really like this angle on the case itself, and the dial and the layout. Nice and simple, legible, great contrast. Yeah, it's a very oversized watch for what it is. Not Stevenson. Oh dear, what am I saying? Svensson. Thank you. Tobin Svensson. I spelt your name wrong. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Truth Fears. So if this is you, Truth Fears, thank you for sending this in. Gorgeous looking watch. I love the combinations and the lighting and everything else. But again, we're coming to that we have hit the 3.5 hour mark, so I have to motor. Last but not least, before we get to the 2 final Pateks, Megan is still here. You are a dream, Megan. Thank you. you're keeping up with me, so it's good. You know, it's nice to know that someone else is staying awake as long as me, and it's kind of uplifting. So Tetley sends in. Now I got quite a fright when I saw this, because this reminds me of a Gerard Perregaux, actually, in many ways. This is a Titus. Ooh, I'm going to botch this so bad. Solville et Titus. I'm probably Solville et Titus. Please, can someone help me there? But this looks so much like a Gerard Perregaux. You can tell by the way the dial's been done. This piece is, I feel like this is quite a vintage piece. You can see by the loom plot. I don't know if Tetley is in the chat, but looks great. It really does look nice. And stunning piece, all in all the way through. It's nice and simple and basic. It also gave us a good shot of it on the side, so we get a good understanding. This piece really does feel like another model from the late 60s, 70s, roundabout. Tetley, send me some tea, for sure. And Random Rob, wow, great having you here, Random Rob. Just as the show is like coming to the end, 3.5 hour runtime, we're having a look at 2 final awesome pieces. And question, is that a tuning fork? I really don't know. Titus as a brand is a very popular name. Oh, it does say tuning fork. You're right. In cursive on the dial here, tuning fork. I just love the finish. I'd like to look at this watch a bit more in future. The brand, actually, they made some amazing dive watches back in the day, and probably a quartz piece, as some are saying, with the tuning fork finish. But the dial is so captivating. I think it's really a character. Okay, so now we're getting to the last 2 Pateks. Now, it's difficult to... This is actually great. We can end the show. In the next 10 minutes, we can talk about these 2, and then I have to sign off because, you know, we're getting to the 4-hour mark. Do something ridiculous, you know. First, we'll chat about Russell's Patek, and we've seen this a few times before, but it is 5212A that many people are loving to wear. I feel like we featured this at the end of the last show we had, Wrist Shot Week, belonging to Zane. Russell also has one. 5212A is a peculiar beast, but also one that I think is a great casual outlier. Under the radar, simple, basic. The one thing that detracts the dial for me is and a couple have actually mentioned this before, the date window. We all wish the date window had its own hand assigned to it, because that's really what this watch exemplifies. The idea of having separate hands linking to the days and the dates. But in steel, it looks like a Mayan calendar. Yes, it's just so peculiar and out of the normal. But it is stunning, and it really takes its inspiration from the reference 2512, I think, if I'm not wrong. And it's all down to, it was a ridiculous watch. It was like something like 43 mils in size. It had this very peculiar stepping to the lugs. Can I get a better angle? This lug stepping was one of the core inspirations behind it back in the day. Zane, yes, I stole his strap idea, so it's identical. That's pretty hilarious. Yeah, because you guys know each other on forums and everything else. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, it really is a stunning piece and so peculiar and out there. So Russell, thank you for sending in your pieces, not only the Freak, but also the 5212. The only time we've ever gotten to see these kinds of watches is on a show like this, which I think is spectacucular. Last but not least, one of my most favorite watches in the Patek line, I've actually made Christmas Day. Is that what you... Oh, that's awesome. I just noticed Russell saying that in the chat. Christmas Day, literally the end of December, the last week, Wednesday, the 25th. How cool is that? I didn't even see, as I'm trying to talk around it, I didn't even notice. So that's what the watch looks like, Christmas Day, just as we're about to tick over to January. Must be amazing seeing everything just flip over every night. Anyway, going to carry on through to the final watch of the show that I think is one of my favorites of all time. Zane also mentioning the 2512A, 46 mils. So this is what this watch was inspired by. My favorite watch from Zane, I think my favorite in his collection is this piece. And if I had all the money in the world, if I was getting married, no, put that right. If I was ever getting married as a wedding gift, this is the kind of watch I would die for. Patek 3, dear me, I'm really getting dyslexic now too. A 5370p platinum. So this is pretty much the end all be all when it comes to chronographs. A split chronograph, and he said, and this was his title, basically saying a summer daily watch. And he uses an orange highlight to accent that too. And stop the press, as Hans says. So this piece, I made a video about this a long time ago. I think it received about 2,000 views, and that's it. I called the video Black Beauties. So look up Patek Black Beauties on Google and you'll see it. It's a gorgeous cover photo. I got a black horse, and I looked at the variant that came before this, the original split chronograph, the 5959 or something. And this piece is quite the modern marvel, just considering what it does. The fact that it's in platinum is something else that's special. And this is what I wanted to end the show off on and talk about, especially, again, another detail that some might be interested in. Email is French for enamel. I hope I'm saying that right, but it's an enamel dial platinum case. It should have a little diamond at the base of the case here in the bottom. Such a gorgeous looking finish with Breguet numerals, loomed hands, which I think are practical. We have seen these watches shared both from Russell and Zane at this point in time, which is amazing. Russell and Zane both have 5212s and these in platinum. So they pretty much vie for the top spot all the time with their stuff. And I've got to find a very rich lady. Brahmi, yeah. I mean, as a wedding gift, this would be just out of this world. I wanted to try and hone in on, there was a great question asked of me earlier that I'm going to make a video about this week, actually, about what it means to save for a certain watch, or what it means to aspire to own something. And I said that an important aspect about a watch is it needs to be something that brings you back for more, always. So you look at the piece and you think to yourself, what is it about me that draws to it at this point? I'm looking at it now, just on the offset, and I'm looking at how the whites are just so bright and accentuated on the dial. The whites everywhere. The rail dial, the numerals set, the typefaces used, that just stands out so much to me. And in a different light, you would see how these Breguet numerals play in the light, and how the enamel dial has a beautiful reflective quality to it. How the weight of the piece in platinum is like it's a brick. The complication, there's so many little factors. The fact that the watch glows in the dark, there's numerous features about this piece that makes it something that you could return back to and say, holy smokes, I'm wearing this thing, you know? Very special piece, it sure is. And we are about to hit we just passed the 35-minute mark at our 3-hour point. Tanku, it's a pleasure. To all of you who have joined, to the 180 people who are still watching the show, it is an absolute pleasure doing this. And again, you who have sent these pieces in, it's because of you that the show has run the way it has. And I hope it's been entertaining. And Zane saying, Russell, is the orange too much? The regional allocation manager from Geneva said it was crazy. Yeah, it kind of, I mean, if you were living in Amsterdam, this would be absolutely perfect. You know, you would be the hottest item on the block. But as always, yeah, you guys are great. I'm going to close this off because we really have been running for way too long as it is. I can't actually believe I'm still conscious. So I'm going to stop the screen sharing and just address you a bit more in the chat. Thomas, again, thank you for the super chat. I don't know. I think the best thing I could have done was made you an admin for the page, for the show, just because you deserve it, because you're always here and, you know, such a devotee, and it's amazing. You all are fantastic people. The fact that you can send these in, that we can share and see what everyone looks at, it's always a joy and a pleasure. So to all of you, everyone who's joined late, I mean, literally 3.5 hours, give it a few hours and the show will be fully saved on YouTube and you can watch it again to your heart's content. But as always, enjoy your weekend, enjoy your Sunday, have a great start to next week. Keep in mind, Wednesday, I'll be putting out a video on Smith's piece, the only prototype in the world at this point, which was a lot of fun to write about. There's video footage. I go to the nines with all the colors and get to all the details. So look forward to that. But otherwise, maybe we can do another one of these next weekend. I don't know. I'll announce it on Monday or Tuesday, maybe. Maybe I'll take the next weekend off and do something else a little bit different. But yeah, I also do kind of like the philosophical discussions too, but you know, that's the way it is. So to all of you, Megan, I don't know, I'll have to shout out to all of you guys and girls. Megan, 90 knots. I think you are Hatsi, so it's good having you here. Hatsi or Hatsi. Robert, Ant G, Zane, as always, Pilot Style, Brummy, all of you who have joined, and the millions of others who've come and gone. Always a pleasure. Have a superb evening, day, wherever you are in the world, and I will catch you in the next one. See you next week. And yeah, just enjoy your watches. Keep enjoying them. They are a great hobby. Cheers for now.